Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm gonna explain an interesting story. Let's start with the story.
Demian remembers the day he first stepped onto a battlefield at the age of 25. That was the moment he had to take a life for the first time in order to survive. After that, he ended up defeating more than 2,000 enemies in that bloody clash. Blood was splattered everywhere as he tried to stay on his feet. Extreme exhaustion finally caught up with him, and he collapsed onto the cold ground. Suddenly, the scene shifts completely to a sunny day in front of a large building. Young Demian is told that the insurance money from his late parents will be controlled by his uncle. The man coldly asks the boy to sign the papers after taking a quick look at them. The man calls the young boy by the name of Demian, while waiting for him to sign right away. The uncle says with a fake smile that there is no need to read anything, and just sign to get it over with. He even falsely promises to return everything the day the boy becomes an adult. Gripping the paper very tightly, Demian knows that was the day his life fell apart, but the boy tears up the document and demands that the money go into an imperial account in his name. His uncle is completely shocked to see the paper destroyed in that way. Demian demands strict terms to ensure no one can withdraw the money without his permission. The boy's serious look shows that he knows exactly what he is doing. Realizing his plan has been ruined, his uncle clenches his fist in deep anger. Overcome with fury, the man grabs the young boy by the collar, shouting at him to just sign. Instead of getting scared, Demian smiles in relief, seeing that his uncle is still the same scoundrel. The uncle is confused by that bold reaction, but ends up taking a well-aimed punch to the face. Demian knocks the man down with the blow and ironically thanks him for still being total trash. The lawyer watches the entire scene, completely frightened by the boy's strength. Trembling with fear, the man hurries to prepare the new contract with the required conditions. The protagonist recalls that he was only 13 years old at the time and could do nothing. But now everything is different because he inexplicably managed to return to the past. The memory flashes back to the dark night when he was about to die on the battlefield. Demian recalls how utterly hopeless and terrible that situation was. He had warned from the very beginning that that mission was madness with no chance of victory. After all, it was impossible for 100 soldiers to defeat an army of over 2,000 men. Cries of despair echoed as his comrades in arms were being massacred. He witnessed the slaughter of his allies right before his eyes without being able to do anything. Demian ended up finding the lifeless body of his companion fallen on the bloody ground. Closing his friend's eyes, he deeply laments not having prevented that tragedy. The warrior kneels, thinking that if he had been stronger, he could have saved everyone. Overcome by frustration, he strikes the muddy ground hard, consumed by pain. Wounded and bleeding heavily, Demian feels his strength fading away rapidly. He realizes that his end is very near and that he will soon lose his life there as well. His metal helmet ends up rolling far away, revealing his tired face. As blood drips down his body, various thoughts flood Demian's mind. He wonders if everything would be different had he joined the army much earlier. With his last breath, he wishes from the bottom of his heart for just one more chance at life. The warrior recalls his determination, leading his men with bravery in combat. He was certain he could have dominated the battlefield alongside his companions. His consciousness faded away, and he was certain he was going to die in that place. However, he wakes up and realizes that he truly went back in time to his childhood. The protagonist realizes in shock that he returned 17 years into the past straight to his old bed. Looking at his small hands, he finally realizes he has been given a new opportunity. Immediately, he checks the region of his abdomen to check his mana center. He is greatly relieved to notice that his mana flow is completely intact this time. Demian remembers that in the past, his money was stolen, and he had to survive the hard way. Demian remembers that he was abandoned by his guardian and ended up taking the blame for a gangster to get arrested. From prison, he ended up suffering forced recruitment and was dragged straight to the battlefield. At that moment, he thought his life was over and that he would have no other prospects for the future. But against all expectations, the young man managed to survive and became a powerful centurion in the army. He smiles, thinking about his journey, but remembers that at the very end he died on the battlefield. Suddenly, he hears a strange noise in the room and realizes his time of calm has come to an end very quickly. Dimian quickly gets up from bed upon noticing that there is an intruder trying to enter his room silently. The boy grabs a hidden dagger from under the pillow, while the intruder starts opening the bedroom door. The door opens very slowly, and the enemy enters the room, making almost no noise to try and surprise him. Only Dimian was already expecting this and jumps from above directly toward the intruder, who is left in shock. With a quick movement, the young man plunges his dagger directly into the enemy's leg, who lets out a groan of great pain. Dimian feels a bit frustrated upon realizing the blade only went in halfway because of his lack of strength. It is at that exact moment that a second assassin emerges from the shadows with a knife in hand, shouting that he will finish him. The boy manages to dodge the slashing attack with extreme ease, demonstrating very impressive calmness. The assassin gets furious with the miss and advances again with hatred, trying to deal a fatal blow to the young man. Dimian ducks under the blade with agility and takes advantage of the opening to prepare his own counterattack. He lands a precise hit that makes the opponent cough up blood, while trying to understand how he was surpassed. With a gloomy look and a bloody knife, the boy demands to know who ordered that cowardly attack. The two intruders fall to the ground completely defeated and start groaning in pain while bleeding heavily. Dimian grabs one of them by the collar with great force to prevent him from trying to escape or pull any stunt. He points the dagger at the man's neck and asks directly if Pucker sent the two of them there. Facing the enemy's silence, the young man shouts again, demanding an immediate answer about the mastermind of the crime. A mysterious voice coming from the hallway comments that the boy's attitude is way too scary for his age. Dimian recognizes the blonde man at the door as Mookman, who is surprised to see the young man already knows his name. The protagonist starts reasoning quickly upon noticing the presence of that warrior there in his room. Without hesitating for a single second, Dimian slashes the assassin's throat on the ground, leaving the other man shocked by the coldness. With an enigmatic smile, the young man realizes things are about to get very interesting from then on. He recalls that 17 years ago things happened in a totally different way than that. In the first timeline, he was captured very quickly even though he tried to escape into the city alleys. He ended up being cowardly assaulted and was immobilized by the goons without having the slightest chance to defend himself. He stayed under heavy rain thinking about that whole humiliating situation felt like an endless nightmare. Dimian finally understands that the kidnapping was entirely planned by the greedy Pucker to steal his fortune. Back in the present, the boy delivers one more relentless blow to finish off the second assassin on the bedroom floor. He observes the two lifeless bodies fallen on the rug and prepares to face the next threat standing at the door. Overcome by anger, the young man realizes that his own uncle was responsible for selling him to those criminals. Mookman watches the young man with a sarcastic smile on his face, showing that he does not care about the death of the goons. Without wasting time, the warrior draws his sword and charges at high speed toward Dimian to deliver an attack. The boy manages to pull off a spectacular dodge and avoids the sharp blade by leaning his body back at the right time. The swordsman is completely shocked upon realizing he missed the strike and that his target managed to escape unharmed. Dimian looks at him with a confident smile and wonders if that warrior was always this weak. He reveals that he possesses a very special skill acquired during his harsh life on the battlefield. After going through countless combats, he learned to read the gaze and posture of his adversaries with precision. He manages to predict the waist rotation and shoulder movement of the enemy even before the attack happens. Thanks to this incredible perception, the young man can see exactly where the rival's blow will be struck. Mookman becomes totally desperate seeing that all his fast strikes are being avoided with ease. The man yells angrily, calling the boy a rat, but Dimian just finds those movements slow and predictable. With agility, Dimian approaches and grabs his opponent's wrist, breaking the rhythm of his sword attack. Mookman's sword slips from his hands and falls heavily to the ground, making the warrior let out a groan of pain. The young man immobilizes the enemy's arm and shows that he now has total control of that dangerous combat situation. Completely furious, the warrior screams curses while trying to break free from the overwhelming strength of that boy. Mookman falls to his knees, coughing heavily, while realizing he was completely defeated by a child. He trembles with dread, unable to accept that he was easily subjugated by a mere 13-year-old boy. Without showing any mercy, the young man delivers a precise blow to neutralize the threat in front of him once and for all. The warrior looks in shock at the protagonist, unable to believe someone so young has so much coldness. Dimian calmly lifts his shirt, revealing that he was wearing iron armor to defend himself from the blows. He explains that he can predict every movement just by observing the posture and the way the enemy raises their arm. The man sweats coldly, feeling that logical explanation makes no sense at all for a boy of that age. The young man warns that that is the absolute truth and that he can choose to believe it or not. While pointing the dagger, the warrior threatens that others will come after him if news about his skills ends up spreading. Dimian responds coldly, reminding the man that he will die right there and will have no way to tell anyone anything. He demands to know once again if his Uncle Pucker was the true mastermind behind that entire ambush. The warrior remains in total silence, without answering the boy's direct question, who keeps him under the dagger. Dimian threatens him, saying it is better to answer if he does not want to spend the rest of his days limping in pain. The man feels a deep chill upon realizing that that child's threat is totally real and ruthless. He wonders how a simple child of only 13 years old can carry such a scary and gloomy look. The warrior finally confesses that Pucker ordered them to bring him back nearly dead, and the young man says that was all he needed. Mookman gets confused, not understanding the young man's reaction, but soon notices a surgical cut forming on his neck. The man desperately tries to stem the bleeding, while realizing he was betrayed even after confessing everything. The warrior collapses lifelessly onto the cold floor, while Dimian simply turns his back on the body without hesitating. He knows that before leaving, he needs to find a way to clean up all that mess and eliminate loose ends. The protagonist recalls an important lesson from his past life about avoiding making unnecessary enemies. However, he knows very well that if by any chance he ends up making a rival along the way, things change. The only logical way out in these situations is to completely crush the opponent to ensure they never return. The scene cuts to the outside of the Grand Mansion, which is plunged into the silence and darkness of the night. A mysterious man wearing a hood looks at his pocket watch, calculating that the job must already be done. In the office, Dimian's uncle is terrified, but the assassin guarantees he will bring the boy dragged in there soon. Montal ironizes the situation, saying the client must be very irritated to hire a professional over a child. Pucker strikes the desk hard, overcome by fury, remembering his face was hurt because of his nephew's audacity. The assassin asks him to have patience and warns seriously not to try to lower the agreed payment amount. Suddenly, knocks on the door break the office silence, making the two men look intrigued towards it. The hooded man assumes the goon has arrived with the boy, while the uncle plans to soon regain control of the Imperial insurance. He thinks with hatred that as soon as he gets the contract signed, his nephew will finally be discarded for good. Montal opens the door complaining about the delay, but is surprised by a sudden slashing attack coming from the darkness. The assassin quickly dodges the blow and realizes with fright that his companions failed miserably in the mission. Dimian enters the office imposingly carrying a large spear and calls the intruder at the door a mere lackey. The hooded warrior gets extremely annoyed at being called a lackey by such a young adversary. The boy mocks, saying he is nothing more than a cheap goon doing the bidding of that pig of an uncle. Instead of getting furious, the assassin starts laughing out loud, finding that childish provocation quite amusing. He turns his back to look at the client, showing he has no fear whatsoever of that armed child. Montal warns the boy's uncle that the commission fee will have to be tripled, leaving the man totally in shock. He justifies the increase by saying he had a major loss of men, and therefore the charged amount is completely fair. The mercenary points to the fresh blood on the tip of the boy's spear, proving his goons were eliminated. Damian remains firm, holding his spear, ready for any new confrontation that might arise in that room. He evaluates the boy in front of him, realizing that mission ended up gaining a totally unexpected variable. The mercenary prepares, knowing he will now have to deal personally with the youth who defeated all his men. The desperate uncle tries to protest against the abusive amount without knowing how to react to the assassin's price. Montel threatens to leave immediately if the payment is not accepted, making the client beg him to wait. Pucker looks scared at the nephew armed with a spear and realizes he is completely defenseless if the guard leaves. The boy's look is so intimidating and that it makes his uncle let out a skreak of pure dread upon feeling cornered. In a panic, the man screams that he will pay triple because he knows he will be dead if Montel decides to leave him alone there. With the new deal closed, Montel smiles with disdain and prepares to start actual combat. He states coldly that he does not care about his men's fate because all of that is just business. But Damian responds that he cares a lot because those scoundrels' plan completely ruined his life. The young man recalls how he spent half of his past life running and rotting in the alleys like trash. In that terrible time, he ended up having his mana flow completely destroyed and lost his hopes. Because of that, he warns he will not spare any of their lives and tells the assassin to just accept death. Irritated by the boy's audacity, Montel charges rapidly, delivering a swift blow with his sharp sword. The protagonist reacts masterfully and manages to block the precise attack using the metallic tip of his spear. The mercenary realizes with surprise that the young adversary is strategically aiming at his legs to knock him down. Damian analyzes his opponent and acknowledges that he is indeed dealing with a much higher tier warrior. A loud sound of metal echoes through the luxurious office as the two continue exchanging fierce attacks. The assassin tries to strike from top to bottom, but the youth uses his great perception to dodge at the right time. Montel keeps total focus on the combat and tries to read the boy's movements to find a definitive opening. He delivers a high blow, forcing the boy to raise his defense to protect his face during the onslaught. Taking advantage of the fact that the youth's upper guard is busy, the mercenary focuses his real attack on his thigh. However, a perfect block happens, totally frustrating the experienced assassin's plan in combat. Damian demonstrates absolute tranquility in parrying the blow without suffering even a single scratch on his leg. The man is shocked to see his secret attack neutralized in such a clean and quick way by the youth. Unable to comprehend what just happened, the warrior steps back completely disoriented. He realizes with astonishment that the boy already knew exactly which of his arms would make the real attack from the start. With a quick movement, the youth delivers a powerful blow that knocks the adversary backward, letting out a scream of pain. The protagonist calmly says he already knew everything long before the opponent even considered starting his movement. Gritting his teeth in pure anger, the assassin swears revenge against that child who humiliated him in combat. He screams desperately that he will kill him, but his scream is abruptly cut short by a swift and merciless blow. The warrior's expression changes to absolute dread upon realizing the lethality of that silent counterattack. He collapses to the floor on his knees, coughing up a lot of blood while feeling his life slip away rapidly and painfully. Damian acknowledges that he was stronger than the regular goons, but in the end, he was still just alley trash. The youth cleans his weapon coldly and prepares to pay attention to the last remaining problem inside the office. Upon seeing the terrifying scene, the uncle collapses to his knees and starts stuttering, begging desperately to be heard. Damian completely ignores the cowardly pleas and continues walking calmly toward the terrified man. In total panic, the man crawls backward, begging his nephew not to come a single step closer. A terrifying scream echoes from inside the grand mansion, cutting the funeral silence of that night's darkness. The next day, an official clerk confirms the deposit of a gigantic amount of coins into the boy's account. The first thing Damian did after solving the problems was personally collect the imperial insurance money. The young man thanks them formally for the service while the clerk bows, showing much respect for the client. Curious, the man politely asks where the youth intends to go now that he has settled all his business. He comments that the luxurious carriage parked outside indicates the boy is about to take a long journey. That the protagonist reveals without hesitation that his major current plan is to enlist immediately in the Imperial Army. He confirms the decision, explaining that there are very important people he needs to find as soon as possible. Sitting comfortably in the carriage, the youth watches the scenery as he travels toward his new destination. He knows his old companions are there and feels the army is the only place where he truly belongs. Demian recalls that in just 5 years a major change will occur and many youths will be forcibly recruited. A devastating and inevitable era of war is approaching rapidly, and no one will be able to escape it. But since in this life he managed to prevent his mana center from being destroyed, everything will be totally different. Instead of enlisting late at age 25, the youth knows it is much better to volunteer while he is still young. His plan is to go to the capital to train for a week before applying for the 3rd training camp. He swears to himself that this time he will not just be carried by the current of that chaotic era. With a determined look, the protagonist promises he will completely dominate the era of wars to come. 1 week passes, and the carriage finally arrives in front of the imposing barracks of the 3rd training camp. A loud impact echoes in the training area, showing that recruits are already working hard on their activities. Some recruits watch Demian with surprise and wonder where that boy learned such advanced techniques. Focused on his training, the youth makes quick movements with the spear, but feels he still needs a few adjustments. He looks at his worn hands, wondering if he should put on bandages since his current body is still very weak. Demian remembers that his small hands of today look nothing like the calloused hands of his adult self. An armored officer approaches asking if he wants to apply, and the youth confirms it convincingly. The man praises the young man's technique and asks where he learned that spear art at such an early age. That technique is actually the standard and most common style used by regular soldiers throughout the kingdom. The boy invents that he learned everything from his late father, making the instructor quickly apologize for the subject. He feigns patriotic pride, winning the immediate sympathy of the evaluator, who approves him with top marks right away. Demian amuses himself, internally seeing the man's exaggerated reaction as he tries to justify himself awkwardly. Recovering his posture, the evaluator clears his throat and asks the young candidate's name to register him. The boy positions himself firmly and introduces himself officially by the name of Demian before the officer. The instructor wishes the youth good luck and gives a friendly pat on his shoulder before ending that conversation. Demian thanks him respectfully while watching the officer walk away, climbing the stone stairs of the place. As soon as he is alone, the youth starts concentrating his energy and notices a faint purple light emanating from his hands. Upon feeling that familiar vibration, he gets emotional, realizing his mana flow is finally active. He smiles with satisfaction upon noting he has finally recovered the ability to manipulate mana in this new life. This sensation of power coursing through his body brings a huge wave of relief and confidence to the young warrior. The flow of magical energy stabilizes in his hands, showing that his initial week training worked out. With this achievement, he feels perfectly prepared to face the practical challenges coming next. He used a very efficient mana cultivation method that would only be developed by a genius 15 years from then. In the past, he had memorized that method out of despair, even knowing he could not use it because of his injury. His subordinates used to joke with him, asking why he studied a method so much if he could not use magic. At the time, Demian got annoyed by the jokes, but kept focused on studying to keep his mind occupied. Now he realizes all that mockery was worth it, and focuses his thoughts on passing the barracks exam. While walking through the training courtyard, the youth spots someone who catches his attention in the middle of the crowd. He recalls that a legendary warrior from his past life started his career right at that camp. The boy wonders with curiosity what the current appearance of that future military hero of the kingdom must be like. The recipe focuses on the main courtyard of the camp, where several candidates are already positioning themselves for the tests. The first practical test of physical strength simply consists of managing to lift a huge, heavy rock. Despite seeming simple, lifting over 30 kilos above the head serves to eliminate the weak novices. Dimian lifts the weight without any difficulty, and the evaluator shouts announcing that he passed the first test. The boy smiles knowing that after reaching the first level of mana, a simple task like that is no challenge at all. With the closure of the first stage, all approved candidates gather to hear the rules of the next test. The officer shouts from the podium, calling everyone's attention to kick off the second phase of the admission exam. He announces that the next test will be a long-distance run with a stipulated time limit for the finish. The man explains that minor physical bumps between competitors are permitted during the running route, but any direct attack is forbidden, and the boy deduces that disguised instructors will be watching the crowd. The officer warns that leaving the track results in disqualification and asks everyone to keep that instruction in mind. The protagonist gives a confident smile, thinking that group challenge is going to be quite fun to compete in. The running track is marked on the ground, showing the exact path candidates will need to follow in the test. While doing his stretches, Demian is surprised by a blonde boy who warns that they are in the same group. The blonde confesses in a friendly manner that he had already been watching the protagonist quite closely for some time. Demian gets confused by the comment and suddenly feels he has seen that young man's face somewhere else. The blonde lets out a light laugh, asking if he is really curious and does not know why he is being watched. The boy approaches and whispers discreetly that he noticed Demian is using magical energy in the test. Demian knows that ordinary commoners do not usually use magic without the support of nobles or without very special origins. He starts suspecting the blonde boy's identity and decides to ask his name directly right away. The boy introduces himself proudly as Apel, leaving the protagonist in complete internal shock. Demian remembers that Apple is the legendary plebeian warrior who will become a general and count at 30 years of age in the future. Apel confesses he was getting bored at the place for having no one his age and suggests they do their best. Demian accepts the friendly handshake, thinking he has no reason to refuse a good relationship with the future hero. The instructor shouts on the megaphone, telling everyone to get ready at the starting line because the race is about to begin. As soon as the signal is given, all candidates dash at high speed, kicking up a huge dust cloud on the track. Demian starts running at a calm and steady pace, preferring to analyze the track before wearing himself out for nothing. The other novices get tired quickly right at the start and begin questioning the young protagonist's strategy. He comments with Apple about a famous obstacle in the test popularly known everyone as the Wall of Lamentations. The blonde suggests going slow to overtake everyone at the end, but Demian warns that strategy does not suit him. With an explosive impulse, the boy accelerates his pace surprisingly, leaving all the competition behind for good. Apel widens his eyes completely in shock upon seeing the overwhelming and sudden dash of his new companion. Meanwhile, the other competitors try to stay calm, planning to save their energy only for the final minutes. Suddenly, one of the runners hears fast steps approaching from behind and looks intrigued to see who is arriving. The competitor is incredulous, seeing Demian running like a madman, wrapped in a strong gust of wind toward him. The instructors infiltrated in the crowd notice the rookie's momentum and decide to teach a lesson to test his limits. A muscular man smiles with mockery, planning to slam his iron shoulder against the boy to interrupt his run. But with extreme agility, Demian just lightly places his hand on the big guy's hip while flying past him. The man is left totally unresponsive, seeing the boy leap past him with so much ease without even suffering a block. Without looking back, the youth keeps running at an incredible speed, opening a big lead over the whole crowd. On the observation podium, the officers start shouting, telling the guards to do something to contain the boy. The boy knows the officers are experienced, but still fully trusts his own acquired skills. He reflects with conviction that in the end, those men are just simple basic camp instructors. Apel starts laughing out loud in the middle of the confusion, finding Demian's unbelievable performance sensational to watch. The blonde feels his warrior spirit ignite and decides he cannot let himself lag behind in the test either. With renewed determination, the future Count dashes at high speed, trying to catch up with his new friend in the race. The other novices watch that enthusiastically and decide to speed up, imitating the protagonist's bold strategy. An avalanche of competitors starts running desperately, creating a huge commotion on the training track. The officers' plan to maintain control of the test goes down the drain, generating immense general confusion on the course. At the top of the tower, the officers admit the mood of this test is way out of the ordinary and think about intervening in the race. But Instructor Rayman's voice emerges, commanding everyone to let the situation run its course naturally without any interference. Rayman calmly explains that knowing how to deal with chaos and create their own openings is also part of their skill. On the running track, the youth keeps maintaining his excellent physical performance without giving any sign of extreme fatigue. The experienced instructor gives a satisfied smile upon seeing that his intuition about the boy was totally right today. He watches in admiration how that young man's bold attitude managed to motivate all the other recruits to run harder. Rayman knows true war leaders are those who manage to ignite a flame of courage in their allies. Dimian starts panting heavily upon realizing he has finally completed 29 out of the 30 required laps there. He focuses his remaining energy and prepares to make his final push on the last lap of the rigorous admission exam. It is at that moment that Apple manages to match pace with the protagonist, demonstrating inviolable physical endurance as well. The blonde jokes, saying Demian still looks full of energy and asks if all of that was already in his plans. Looking back, they see the other candidates completely exhausted and fainting from exhaustion on the track's grass. Demian gives a half smile, reflecting that if you have a strategic advantage, there is no reason not to use it. Appel agrees with his new companion's logic and admits he finds Demian an extremely interesting boy. The protagonist returns the compliment as the two firmly step on the finish line, successfully completing the test. Panting evaluator announces that the two young prodigies passed the rigorous long-distance running test. In the fort commander's office, a report about the arrival of a talented boy starts drawing attention. The assistant confirms the news, reporting that the said prodigy boy is only 13 years old according to Rayman. The commander hears everything thoughtfully, knowing that if the demanding Rayman found the boy promising, he must truly be special. He slowly stands up from his chair, admitting he is quite curious to meet the said youth in person. The imposing one-eyed man in a black cape adjusts his posture and asks for the name of the young recruit in question once and for all. Meanwhile, in the camp courtyard, a large crowd of novices starts forming around the official board. Several competitors burst into tears and despair upon seeing their names are not on the list of approved candidates for the exam. While everyone celebrates their approval wildly, the protagonist wonders if that is truly a reason for so much joy. He remembers that in times of war, enlistment is mandatory and people do everything to avoid the battlefield. Reflecting on this, the youth concludes the current era is still peaceful, but his thought is interrupted by a call. It is a Papal who approaches smiling to congratulate him and announce that the two are now official team companions. Dimian is slightly surprised and asks if he passed too, and the blonde confirms, saying he saw both their names on the list. He points to the top of the document, where Demian's name and his age of 13 appear highlighted with much brightness. The blonde says he hopes to work well by his side, even knowing they might not stay in the same combat unit. Appel asks about plans for the remaining week before training, and the boy responds he will be quite busy. With a serious look, the youth explains he has some important pending matters to resolve during that short period. The friend hugs him sideways, asking what matters those would be, and he just says he needs to buy some supplies. Appel warns that official military boots are extremely tough and recommends buying insoles to protect the feet. The protagonist stays silent, remembering he already knows that very well from personal experience in his suffered previous life. He thanks the advice in a polite and friendly manner, promising to keep that important tip in mind from now on. Demian asks about his companion's plans, and the blonde boy reveals he also has his own pending affairs. The youth notices his friend's mysterious reaction, who starts whistling, disguising any detail about his true life. They say goodbye, wishing each other luck on mutual preparations, before heading totally different ways in the courtyard. As soon as the boy walks away, a mysterious man in a black hood emerges silently right behind the smiling Appel. The hooded elderly man asks discreetly who that boy was, and the youth recognizes him immediately by the name of Alan. Appel gets thoughtful about his new companion and wonders for what reason such a talented boy wants to enlist. He recalls how the amount of magical energy demonstrated by the youth during the race was unusual for his age. The blonde remembers the amusing provocations they exchanged on the track and how that rivalry dynamic was fun. The warrior remembers the boy's convict response about the army being the only place where he truly feels he belongs. He concludes Demian certainly carries his own reasons and deep secrets that cannot be shared. The young man tells his servant he has a hunch that he will see that intriguing warrior by his side for a long time. He changes the subject, calling the servant to leave toward the luxurious carriage, already waiting for them there. The blonde scolds his companion, reminding him he must not call him young master in public places under any circumstances. The elderly man apologizes respectfully for the slip, maintaining a formal posture while they continue walking through the courtyard. The scene shifts to the imposing and bustling capital of the kingdom, which stands out for its beautiful architecture and crowded streets. Walking through the busy ways, Demian can hardly believe he is back to that place from his childhood. The boy remembers that in his old memory, the capital seemed to be a much more decadent and desperate place. In that gloomy time of war, misery took over everything, with people begging for a simple piece of dry bread. He knows all that cheerful atmosphere will change drastically in 5 years and needs to prepare as much as he can to put his plans into practice. The youth's first logical step is to locate the famous work merchant guild. He knows that when war breaks out, basic supplies and military weapons will become the most valuable items. Because of this great future demand, commercial guilds will play an extremely crucial role in the kingdom. In his past life, the richest merchant corporation on the entire continent was precisely the influential Work Guild. The protagonist recalls when he was an adult soldier and saw the guild's caravans arriving at the military camp. One of his former subordinates ran to report that the aid supplies sent by them had finally arrived. Far away on the sandy road, it was possible to see the immense and protected fleet of goods transport carriages. Soldiers used to comment frustratedly that while they risked their lives in combat, the merchants profited heavily. But Demian reminded them that without the weapons and food sold by that guild, all of them would have been dead for a long time. The soldier agreed despondently, admitting he just felt a certain bitterness over the harsh reality of war. He acknowledged that it was not easy at all for the corporation to fund so many charity works consistently. The captain then ordered his men to go pick up their respective rations and equipment brought by the fleet. The warrior watched the progress of the delivery, knowing his troops' survival depended entirely on that. Subordinate pointed far away, indicating that the supreme leader of that entire corporation was present at the delivery. He looked curiously, trying to identify the leader, who stood out in the crowd for wearing a long white robe. The man in the white robe indeed appeared to be someone extremely arrogant and cold at first sight to the soldiers. Back in the present, Demian walks through the paved and clean streets of the capital in search of his commercial objective. He knows very well that the famous Work Guild already used to carry out various charity actions even before the war started. Demian starts doing the math, knowing that out of the 40 commercial guilds in the capital, only 7 perform charity. He decides to investigate closely only the organizations that possess enough financial capital to bankroll donations. The day comes to an end and the sun begins to set on the horizon, painting the capital's sky with shades of gold and orange. In front of a modest wooden door, the youth lets out a tired sigh, hoping that will be his last stop. He opens the door slowly and asks politely if there is anyone inside to attend to him at that time of day. A man dressed simply and very elegantly approaches and asks with sympathy how he can help the young visitor. Demian bows respectfully and says he came to talk about making a large investment in their charity actions. The merchant thinks the attitude is very noble for someone so young, while Demian knows he needs to confirm his suspicions. The man introduces himself officially as Work, the leader of the Hamel Guild, making the boy immediately recognize that name. Relieved to have finally found the right person, the youth introduces himself as Demian and accepts the invitation to sit down. Already seated at the table, Demian asks an unusual question about the merchant having a son, leaving the man quite confused. Laughing heartily, Work responds that he has no sons and only has a young daughter who is still quite immature. Demian gets a bit disappointed with the response, thinking that Clue was also a dead and in his search. Suddenly, the sound of a door opening catches Demian's attention, who turns quickly to see who is entering. A female voice announces she has arrived home, making the boy widen his eyes in shock upon looking at the door. Seeing the young blonde woman enter, he finally realizes the girl before him is the future legendary leader in the white robe. The father asks his daughter to introduce herself, revealing her name is Deal, and explains the reason for Demian's visit there. With a friendly and slightly shy smile, Deal greets the young investor very politely. She asks with surprise about his interest in supporting the donations, and the protagonist confirms the investment intention. The protagonist reflects that in his past life the guild leader was considered a man, but the age and appearance match. He concludes the leader's youthful appearance in the future was due to her being a woman using her father's name. Focused on business, the young woman asks directly what the exact amount is that he plans to invest in the guild. Demian responds very seriously that he intends to make a generous contribution of 300 gold coins there. Father and daughter are completely stunned by the absurd amount announced by that child and ask if he is serious. Work ponders that since that is an investment and not a donation, there must be some counterpart demanded by the youth there. The boy reveals that in exchange, he wants a share of the merchant guild's future profits as a guaranteed return. The experienced merchant sweats coldly upon realizing the audacity and the incredibly mature business vision of that boy. He wonders how a child has so much money and decides to ask politely what the origin of that fortune is. Demian calms the man by inventing that he is just using the inheritance left by his late parents for a good cause. The merchant apologizes for the inconvenience, and the boy responds very understandingly that it is fine. Work warns that he needs to hold an internal meeting about the shares and promises to give a final answer to the boy soon. After the young investor leaves, Deal notices her father's thoughtful expression and asks if there is something wrong with him. The man smiles and comments that he finds it totally unbelievable that a 13-year-old boy can be so brilliant. The experienced merchant focuses on the protagonist's gaze, knowing that boy is definitely not an ordinary child. He starts joking with his daughter, saying that if Demian were a bit older, he would be the perfect match for her. Dial turns completely red with embarrassment and yells at her father to stop that silly joke right now. The father keeps laughing and teasing his daughter about the boy's taste, while she begs desperately for him to stop. Time flies after the negotiations with the guild, and the long-awaited day of military enlistment finally arrives. With his eyes fixed on the horizon, the youth knows today marks the true beginning of his journey to change the future. He raises his hand toward the sky, swearing his new life will be completely different from his tragic past destiny. With a clenched fist, the protagonist promises himself that this time he will dominate the entire empire with his own hands. Upon entering the barracks, Demian confirms he was assigned to the first platoon of the 3rd Recruit Company. The youth looks around the room and realizes he knows no one there, wondering if Apple stayed in another division. He laments a bit because Apple was the only person his age at the fort with whom he had made a sincere friendship. Suddenly, a loud welcome shout echoes through the room, making the protagonist look intrigued toward the entrance. A robust man introduces himself himself with a big smile, revealing he is Sergeant Brian, the leader responsible for the platoon. Brian warns seriously that he will carry out a thorough and immediate inspection of the belongings brought by each of the novices. He demands the surrender of any drink or tobacco and threatens to severely punish anyone who tries to hide something there. Faced with the scary threat, some recruits start trembling and handing over their prohibited items awkwardly. Demian thinks that attitude is a tremendous idiocy, thinking that if they brought something forbidden, they should at least hide it well. Sergeant Brian inspects Demian's few things on the bed, notes there is nothing illegal in the belongings. Curious about the recruit's appearance, the leader asks what his age is, commenting that he looks way too young. Demian responds naturally that he is only 13 years old, leaving the sergeant completely shocked by the fact. Hearing that, some recruits start grumbling, saying the army has become a joke for accepting children there. Demian just looks back calmly, but the muscular man gets irritated and asks what the boy is staring at. The protagonist closes his eyes, preferring not to waste his saliva arguing with an arrogant recruit of that level. He memorizes the fellow's face well, promising himself to teach him practically that getting beaten up by a child hurts a lot. Feeling a murderous intent in the air, the bald man next to him shrinks with fear upon suffering a sudden chill. Sergeant Brian approaches the bald man, ordering him to immediately put all his belongings on the bed. With a threatening smile, the sergeant asks the nervous boy if he himself needs to search the bag of belongings. Desperate, the recruit denies quickly and starts dumping several smuggled items hurriedly on top of the mattress. Brian gives one last very clear warning to everyone present about what happens to those who try to hide illegal merchandise. He shouts that he will make the offender run laps around the camp throughout the night without any right to rest. Demian gives a slight corner of the mouth smile seeing the fellow's suffering, thinking the punishment was more than deserved. The platoon leader scans the room and notes with satisfaction that the personal belongings inspection was finally concluded. He announces that he now needs to choose an interim leader to command the platoon in his absence during missions. The sergeant reaches into his pocket and pulls out the official document containing the data and approval scores of each recruit. Looking at the paper, he comments smiling that the group counts a soldier who passed the exam with extraordinary grades. Brian calls out loud by the name of Demian and asks everyone who in the room is the owner of that military record. Kyle immediately becomes tense and apprehensive upon realizing the group's leadership might end up falling into another's hands. The sergeant looks at the muscular man asking if he is Demian, but the brute denies and points to the real one. The platoon leader widens his eyes in confusion upon noticing the holder of the highest score is not the strong soldier he imagined. He turns around suddenly and is surprised to face the little 13-year-old boy standing right in front of him firmly. Brian asks again if he really is the 13-year-old youth, and Demian confirms with his head held high without flinching. Kyle rebels, shouting that the army is not a playground and that a child has no conditions to command soldiers. The sergeant tells the noisy recruit to shut his mouth, but the man insists he is just speaking the pure truth. He argues that the interim leader position represents the sergeant himself and demands someone with proven leadership there. Pointing at the boy, the brute claims the discipline of the entire platoon will crumble if a brat takes the position. Demian gives an ironic smile, thinking he did not want that boring position, but the idiot's persistence changed his plans. The boy provokes the rival, saying he will surely do a much better job than an idiot with a muscle brain. Intervening in the conflict, Brian confirms Kyle's name and prepares to give an official solution for choosing the position. The sergeant grabs Kyle's shoulder with great force, applying painful pressure to show who the authority is. With a gloomy and intimidating look, Brian warns he will tolerate no more insults against the companions in arms there. Kyle sweats coldly facing that scary power display and agrees, stuttering that he understood the lesson perfectly. Brian ponders that the brute has some reason, because a leader truly needs strength to guarantee his authority. Kyle tries to suggest a proposal with a raised hand, but is cut short harshly by the sergeant before finishing. Even so, he proposes a direct training duel with the boy where the winner would keep the coveted leadership spot. The platoon leader turns to the young protagonist and asks if he agrees with that combat proposal. Dimian accepts the challenge, thinking that is the perfect opportunity to impose discipline on the group from the start. He points mockingly and asks if it is enough to defeat that piece of muscle to settle the dispute for good. Brian shouts asking if the other recruits agree with the duel, and the whole room responds in unison positively. Without wasting time, the sergeant orders everyone to follow him directly to the combat arena to kick off the duel. Kyle displays an arrogant and confident smirk, believing he will easily crush that fragile child in the arena. With a focused look, the boy positions himself in the arena, hearing the official announcement of the immediate start of the clash. The sergeant explains the basic rules, warning that the fight must stop as soon as one of the competitors declares surrender. The brute confirms he is ready, anxious to unleash all his accumulated fury against the young opponent. Damian just nods positively, demonstrating a terrifying coldness for someone about to fight. The sergeant gives the signal for combat to start, and the surrounding recruits watch attentively to see the outcome of that dispute. The man mocks, saying he feels bad hitting a child, but Damian hits back, telling the windbag to shut his mouth. Overcome by anger at the mockery, Kyle charges furiously at the young adversary with all his brute physical strength. Kyle yells that the reason Damian is getting beaten up like a dog today is solely because of his big mouth. Damian evaluates the opponent's charge and admits he is faster than expected for an ordinary novice. However, with all his accumulated combat experience, the boy knows that is still very little. Damian dodges perfectly under the punch, knowing the brute is no match for him in combat. The attacker is in shock upon realizing his closed fist strike missed the target in an unbelievable way. Kyle gets irritated, thinking it is just luck, and tries to deliver another fast attack, shouting he will not escape. The boy dodges again with extreme ease, and thinks to himself that his movements are way too slow. Furious, the man puts his hands together, preparing a bear hug to try to crush the youth against the sandy floor. He charges with his entire body structure in a desperate attempt to immobilize the agile protagonist. But with a quick body spin, Damian escapes the onslaught, letting the opponent pass straight through the empty space. The brute looks around confused, searching for the target when he hears the boy's voice right behind him. With a punch charged with purple energy, Damian strikes the adversary's flank, who lets out an agonizing groan of pain. The boy watches the rival collapse to the ground, knowing no one can resist a blow imbued with pure mana. To Damian's surprise, the brute starts getting up irritated, showing he has a lot of physical resistance. Overcome by blind rage, the man screams curses and charges, once more with bloodlust toward the protagonist. Seeing the joke has gone too far, the youth decides it is the right time to end that fight for good. He delivers an extremely fast and precise knockout punch that hits the attacker's chin square in the arena. With the violent impact of the blow, the brute is thrown backward and falls completely unconscious to the ground. The other recruits watch that entire scene, completely paralyzed by the devastating strength of that boy. Dusting off his hands, Damian notes that the windbag passed out and turns to speak to the audience. With an intimidating aura, the protagonist stares at the crowd and asks challengingly if anyone else wants to fight. In total panic, the recruits start shaking their heads, immediately denying any intention of facing him. The sergeant announces the end of the fight and declares Damian the official winner, appointing him interim platoon leader. Sometime later, Kyle walks out despondently from the fort's infirmary after receiving proper medical care. He grumbles in embarrassment, remembering he ended up fainting in combat and had to be carried to the infirmary. The warrior realizes with frustration that he lost consciousness right at the first real punch, delivered by the youth in the arena. He admits to himself that he thought no one at the fort could defeat him, but ended up suffering a pathetic fall. Upon opening the dorm door, the brute is greeted by the curious looks of his roommates. The other novices whisper worriedly, thinking whether they should restrain their friend to prevent him from picking another fight. Ignoring everyone, Kyle walks resolutely and stops right behind Damian, who turns around intrigued to see what he wants. Surprising everyone, the big guy kneels before the boy, declaring his defeat and accepting him as his leader. Damian is left totally unresponsive to the rival's attitude, wondering if he ended up hitting his head too hard. Kyle explains with firmness that it is only his duty to show respect to the strongest warrior he has ever faced in life. The youth is surprised to see the brute actually possesses a strong sense of honor and martial respect in his chest. The protagonist says simply that he does not need formal titles and asks to be called just by his name. The two shake hands, sealing a strong and sincere alliance of friendship and mutual cooperation within the camp. A week flies by and intensive training continues, demanding the maximum of everyone's physical conditioning. In the middle of the exhausting run, Damian analyzes that the severe training serves to test the soldier's endurance. At the end of the training, the sergeant ends the work and orders only Damian to accompany him to a reserved room there. Damian walks in silence behind the sergeant, wondering what the reason for that sudden and serious call could be. They stop in front of the administration room door, and the youth assumes some important official announcement will be made. Upon entering the room, the protagonist is surprised to notice other soldiers detached from the fort are already gathered there. The other novices glare at him with disdain, wondering what a child is doing there in the sergeant's meeting room. A mocking recruit makes a joke out loud, comparing the boy's thin build to the weird shape of a praying mantis. Another soldier amuses himself, saying it would be hilarious to put that skinny child next to the big guy Kyle. The boy stares at the provoker very seriously, making the fellow get irritated and ask what he is looking at. Irritated by the stare, the provoker distills his venom, calling him a brat, while the others laugh at the situation. Suddenly, Instructor Raymond's imposing presence demands total silence in the room, cutting all the recruits' commotion. The provoker swears he will deal with Damian later, while the officer confirms all leaders are present. Raymond announces he gathered them to reveal the rules of the platoon competition that will take place in a week at the fort. The training instructor tells the squad leaders to prepare their units well. The officer dismisses everyone shortly after, and the recruits start heading back to the barracks. Suddenly, someone calls out to Damian in the middle of the hallway. A jerky squad leader threatens to rough him up, claiming a kid doesn't get it. However, another recruit defends the boy, telling the big guy to focus on his own platoon instead of picking fights. The young man smiles and warns that the bully is the one at risk of getting a beatdown if he keeps bothering others. Ignoring the commotion, the recruit calls Damian to leave and let that fool talk to himself. Before leaving, the boy stops walking and slightly turns his head. He asks which platoon that troublemaker is from, and the guy answers with pride. With a sarcastic smile, Damian promises to find the fool in the team competition. Walking back down the hall, the young man beside him asks if the boy really is the famous Damian. The protagonist gets curious, and the young man explains he heard amazing things about his score on the practical exam. He introduces himself as Gerard from the 3rd Platoon, and Damian calmly accepts the challenge for the competition. Arriving at the barracks, the boy throws the door wide open, telling everyone to pay close attention. The recruits are confused, asking what's going on for him to show up like that. Damian excitedly announces that the great competition between the platoons will happen in just 1 week. He raises his fist, guaranteeing their team will take first place no matter what. Snapping his fingers, the boy adds that there's one more important detail about their enemies. He grins, saying the main objective is to completely crush the 4th platoon. With a frightening look, he warns that their leader will be the main target of the takedown. The 2nd week of training begins, completely changing the mood at the military camp. The instructor explains that the armed forces' goal is victory and announces a crucial formation drill. He advises that outstanding individual skills will earn extra points for the recruits. Damian thinks it's a smart idea, since everyone there wants good grades to get into specific branches. With an excited smile, the boy thinks the others will have to give it their all. The officer teaches the wedge formation, focused on breaking enemy lines with a frontal assault. He explains that the technique works like a giant arrow, but falls apart if the front line gives way. Demian looks at Kyle, knowing his platoon has the perfect person to lead a strong front. The sergeant orders the recruits to split into 2 groups to practice the wedge formation immediately. Demian asks Kyle to lead one side, while he takes command of the other formation, gathering his team. The protagonist says he'll give them some valuable tips on the technique they were taught. The rookies ask how he knows all that, and the boy makes up that he learned it from his military father. Whispering the strategy, he warns that Kyle's group will do exactly as the instructor said. The recruits find the plan fun and eagerly prepare to put it all into practice. Demian orders the strongest to stay behind him, while the smaller ones hold shields on the sides. He tells everyone to raise their shields to head level, and the soldiers confirm the order. The boy notices the enemy team is completely focused on defense, but thinks it's irrelevant, guiding his squad. He tells everyone to advance without slowing down to end it in a single blow. The instructor finally yells, giving the official order for the mock battle to begin. Kyle's group marches in a synchronized and defensive manner, kicking up dust across the yard. Demian is surprised by the enemy's quick coordination on their first attempt at the formation. Noticing them getting closer, he yells for his platoon to pick up the pace and speed up the attack. The opposing team keeps advancing relentlessly, leaving no gaps in their shield wall. The protagonist channels purple energy, preparing to use mana for the first time in training. He yells for everyone to push hard, seizing the decisive moment. Demian crashes violently against the enemy's shields, breaking the front line's stability. Pushing hard, he tells his squad to focus exactly on the gaps as they had planned. The attack on the open spaces creates a panic in the enemy team, leaving everyone confused about who should defend. With a sharp gaze, Demian aims for the exact instant the hesitation happens. The boy yells the order, and his soldiers push their spears forward, taking advantage of the opening to win. Demian moves forward quickly and steps firmly on the enemy's spear to immobilize the weapon. The enemy soldier panics as he loses his balance and falls awkwardly to the ground. Seeing his front line crumble, Kyle shouts, demanding his allies get up. The big guy realizes how serious the situation is and decides he needs to act himself. Demian blocks the path with his shield and reminds Kyle that they are opponents. The brute pushes against the shield, annoyed, and tells the boy to get out of his way immediately. With a confident smile, the protagonist grants his request and quickly dodges out of the way. Without the shield to support his strength, Kyle completely loses his balance and stumbles. Seizing the opening, Demian hits the big guy head on with a strong shield bash. The boy tells his fallen rival that having a great physique is useless without using your brain. Watching from a distance, the instructor thinks the young man is much more impressive than they said. The officer can hardly believe the technical difference between Demian and the other recruits. Ending the mock combat, the instructor declares the absolute victory of Demian's team. Demian helps Kyle up, and the big guy cheerfully promises he'll win next time. Curious about the defeat, Kyle asks if the young man intentionally focused on the formation's gaps. The other soldiers get excited about the tactic, wanting to use it in the tournament between platoons. Demian proudly notices that the lazy recruits are now training on their own in the late afternoon. He is pleased with their dedication, but suddenly hears someone taunting nearby. The young man turns around curiously and sees some unknown brutes staring him down. The rivals mock Demian's leadership, calling the recruits crazy for following him. Demian's allies get furious at the uncalled for insult and prepare to fight. The troublemakers continue their taunts, calling the protagonist's platoon pathetic. The enemy leader steps in, saying it's the boy's fault for not knowing his place. The protagonist sighs in disappointment, wondering if that fool is begging for a beatdown. Deciding to ignore the offense, he turns his back and tells his group to return to the barracks. At that moment, the boy hears enraged shouts from behind him and turns his head. His allies lose their patience and vow to destroy their rivals in the team tournament. Kyle points a finger in the enemy leader's face, promising to finish him in the combat arena. The big guy confirms with Demian if those fools are the exact enemy platoon. With a scary and furious look, Kyle guarantees they will completely crush their rivals. Motivated by hate, the rookies decide to cancel their rest to continue the tough training. Demian watches the shouting, surprised that his comrades fell for the provocation so easily. Despite that, the boy smiles, realizing this anger will help unite the group even more. Meanwhile, the instructor goes to the grand room of the training center's commander. Commander Varys calmly asks if there are any promising rookies in that class. Instructor Raymond confirms, saying that 2 young men have stood out greatly in training. The superior officer notes their young age, and Raymond reveals that both seem to know how to use mana. Shocked by the information, Varys questions if the boys have important noble origins. The commander thinks that mastering mana is almost impossible for mere commoners in the army. He analyzes Demian and Apple's files, finding their family histories almost too common. The instructor reports that Demian was also involved in a recent scuffle between units. He explains that leaders from other platoons mocked Demian for being a child. However, the platoon fiercely defended the boy, proving their strong bond of unity. Varys finds that dynamic incredibly fascinating and rests his chin on his hand with interest. Tapping his finger on the table, the commander gets a brilliant idea to test those rookies. Varys whispers his secret strategy to the instructor, adjusting the details of the competition. Raymond thinks the plan is dangerous, but Varys counters that it will be a real test of ability. The superior officer orders an absolute increase in training intensity for the rival platoons. On the training field, Kyle feels a sudden chill down his spine. Dreading what's to come, the recruits complain exhaustedly in the barracks, not understanding the reason for the terrible extra punishment. One recruit complains in terror that the instructors even added crawling to the training. Kyle approaches Demian, worried, and asks if the rumor about crawling is really true. The boy sighs, understanding the superior's plan, but says there's nothing they can do. Demian stands in the middle of the barracks and asks if his comrades came here to play around. He motivates the team, stating that the hard training will give them more endurance than the other platoons. One of the rookies smiles, realizing he'd be worse than a kid if he kept whining about the pain. With a friendly smile, the protagonist promises to help everyone so they can do their best in training. One soldier still mutters, afraid of crawling on gravel, wondering if they'll put a blanket there. Kyle notices Demian's confidence, and the boy confirms he's had to crawl many times before. He remembers his past life, where he spent terrifying moments on the ground just to survive. Demian thinks to himself that physical conditioning isn't the real goal of this exercise. He imagines the soldiers will be covered in cuts and bruises after going through the barbed wire. This constant pain will create immense stress that will put everyone's nerves on edge. He deduces that the command wants to test which platoon will stay united even under intense pressure and pain. Determined not to fall for this obvious trap, Demian kneels and tells everyone to grab socks from the supply. The other recruits look at each other, confused, not understanding why they would use socks right now. Holding the fabric tightly, the boy promises to show them how it can save their lives on the ground. A short time later, the first platoon forms in the yard and confirms their presence to the superior officer. Instructor Nilsson calmly introduces himself, announcing that today they will learn to low crawl. He uses an assistant to demonstrate the correct posture of keeping the body straight on the dirt ground. Pointing to the barbed wire course, the instructor asks loudly if everyone is ready. The recruits shout with fire in their eyes, and the man notices they are much more motivated than their rivals. Satisfied with the troops' energy, Nilsson yells, giving the order for the first group to go all out. The soldiers charge, roaring fiercely and dragging their bodies across the dirt with incredible grit. The instructor observes the training, finding it strange that the commander moved up such a painful exercise. He knows that crawling on that sharp ground causes terrible pain and expects to see the young men suffer. Suddenly, Nilsson's eyes widen in total shock at the unbelievable scene on the course. The recruits fly through the obstacle course at an absurd speed while shouting nonstop. The instructor breaks into a cold sweat, completely confused since it's the first time these rookies have done this. One soldier eagerly asks when it will be the second group's turn, and Nilsson points to the course. Startled, the second team advances with the same burst of energy, crossing the barbed wire without a second's hesitation. Nilsson is astounded and compares the boys' unwavering motivation to the fury of hungry warriors. Demian scratches his head, smiling, and bets the instructor never expected such a perfect performance. Kyle praises Demian's plan, saying it was hard to pretend he was in pain on the gravel. The big guy shows his protected elbows, revealing they cut up socks to use as pads. The other recruits also show off their pads and ask in amazement if the boy is a genius. The officer finally announces the end of the training and orders everyone to return to their barracks. Walking across the yard, Kyle looks at Demian and asks where he learned such a clever trick. The young man replies that he learned it from his late father, but notes that he also left a big warning. He remembers a scolding in the past, where the warning was to never get caught by the instructors using tricks. Kyle bursts out laughing, clapping Demian on the back, while the boy complains about his friend's absurd strength. Looking at the weapons in the yard, Demian sighs in relief that they've finally reached spear class. He reflects on the kingdom's spear artistry, which was underestimated by the nobles, but held great power. The boy remembers that many gave up at the basics, but for him in the past, it was the only way. He recalls the arduous training and how his skills grew absurdly after meeting his master. With a nostalgic smile, he wonders if his master is still crazy and hopes to meet him again someday. In the fort's hallway, the exhausted recruits walk, cursing whoever invented crawling on gravel. Kyle stops suddenly when he notices the 4th platoon has also just returned from the punishing training. The rival leader yells furiously, demanding his soldiers shut up and stop whining about the pain. Demian and Kyle watch the scene in silence, noticing the cracks in the opposing team's unity. The enemy platoon leader gets deeply irritated when his own soldiers question his authority. Demian's allies watch the fight, wondering if they'd be in the same situation without the knee pads. Kyle thanks Demian's genius as he watches their rivals fall apart under the stress of the training. The enemies notice that Demian's platoon is unharmed and deduce they used some dirty trick. Overcome by blind fury, the rival leader clenches his fists, promising to crush the protagonist's team. With a look full of hatred fixed on Demian, the leader vows to take first place in the tournament. Time flies by, and the long-awaited day of the competition between platoons finally arrives at the camp. The 4 teams line up perfectly in the yard, awaiting orders from the instructor in charge. In the middle of the formation, Kyle suddenly turns and gets the young leader's attention. The big guy looks closely at the boy, thinking he seems a little different today. Demian plays it off, thinking maybe he's grown a bit since he's still a growing kid. The other recruits burst out laughing, calling Kyle a giant and telling him to stop teasing the boy. Demian is impressed by his friend's sharp instincts and wonders if he noticed the change in his aura. The boy mentally celebrates, having reached the second stage of mana cultivation the night before. He acknowledges that all the effort of secretly training his mana control at the camp was worth it. Quickly changing the subject, Demian calls Kyle back to focus on the competition that's about to start. With a sharp, determined look, the boy demands the platoon win the competition by a landslide. He reminds them that the top 5 soldiers in the tournament will earn the right to choose any item from the armory. Most choose weapons with single-use protection spells, but Demian knows those are low-tier items. The protagonist desires something much more valuable, remembering a rumor told by a subordinate in his past life. He plans to get a high-level permanent attribute ring that grants a special ability to the user to secure the rare item before the talented Apel chooses it. Demian needs to win the tournament in first place. He asks if the big guy can handle it, and Kyle gives a confident smile, confirming he can. Excited by the challenge, the brute claps his hands, getting the attention of all the recruits on the team. Kyle announces Demian's order, guaranteeing the squad will dominate the tournament to take first place. Motivated by the speech, the allies roar in agreement, their eyes burning with the will to win. Kyle smiles, seeing that everyone is ready, and the instructor calls the first platoon to begin the matches. Demian's team marches to the center of the arena, exuding a strong aura of unity and unwavering determination. The competition divides the teams into offense and defense, with positions switching after each new round. The offensive team automatically loses if they can't capture the enemy flag before the time limit. Leading the first round on offense, Demian orders his soldiers to prepare to advance. He reassures the group, telling everyone to execute the wedge formation they practiced exhaustively. The boy tells Kyle to use all his strength on the agreed signal, and the big guy guarantees that power is his specialty. The instructor waves the flag and declares the immediate start of the mock battle between the two rival platoons. The front line of Demian's squad advances quickly, roaring to crush the enemy defenses. The second platoon braces for impact, and their leader tells everyone to hold the formation firmly. The attack collides with force, but the enemy defense proves to be as solid as an impenetrable wall, leaving no openings. The opposing leader finds it strange that Demian's formation seems too withdrawn for an offensive squad. Seeing the enemy team's hesitation, the rival captain orders a simultaneous push to destabilize the attackers. Without wasting time, Kyle lets out a beastly roar and repels the enemy advance with incredibly violent force. The enemies are pushed back abruptly, while their leader desperately screams for them to hold the line. The opponent gets frustrated upon realizing his team should have just focused on defense against the attacking team. At the crucial moment, Demian shouts the big guy's name, giving the awaited signal for the plan's final attack. Kyle dives in headfirst and uses his own gigantic body to brutally run over the enemy's front line. The rivals fly through the air in complete shock, realizing the monster broke the line, using only his shoulders. Keeping up the absurd pressure, Kyle shouts, demanding his comrades line up beside him immediately. The big guy's aggressive advance completely shatters the defensive structure, throwing the recruits to the ground. The opposing leader is baffled by the perfect coordination of Demian's squad in such a short amount of time. The boy quickly spots a flaw in the enemy's rear guard and orders a full-force attack on the weak point. Demian's team completely crushes the rival platoon, clearing the path to victory in the blink of an eye. The instructors watch in admiration, and one of them asks if the first platoon received some extra training in secret. The officer admits he never expected to see mere rookies fighting with the same skill as advanced elite soldiers. Staring intently at the battlefield, the instructor deduces there's only one possible reason for that success. He realizes Demian is the one responsible for it all. As the boy shouts orders to break the enemy formation, the man remembers that the first platoon received voluntary instructions from the young hero every day after training. The recruits raise their shields above their shoulders, perfectly executing everything Demian taught them before. With a smile on his face, the officer is relieved to see the boy achieve these results with pure skill. In the middle of the clash, the rookies create an opening, and Kyle excitedly shouts that this is their big chance to attack. With a wicked grin, the big guy looks for the exact location of the flag on the enemy's side. He laughs menacingly as he spots the target protected by the opponents right behind the shield line. Desperate at Kyle's terrifying approach, the opposing leader tells everyone to forget the attack and focus on defense. The enemy team promptly follows the order, retreating and bunching up in an attempt to stop the brutal advance. The big guy smirks, mocking their foolishness, while the rivals are confused to see the monster just standing there doing nothing. With a victorious expression, the brute announces that the fools fell right into the trap they had set. The opponent's eyes widen in shock, realizing too late that they were completely fooled by the distraction. Seizing the perfect moment, the protagonist uses his great speed to dash towards the rivals. Demian steps firmly on the big guy's shoulders. Using his comrade as a veritable launch ramp, the young man leaps high into the air, easily clearing the entire solid shield barrier of the enemy army. He lands with a violent impact, knocking down the soldier holding the squad's important flag. The time limit for the clash runs out, announcing the defeat of the enemy platoon that failed its offensive mission. Celebrating the undisputed victory, Demian raises the captured red flag while his platoon cheers with joy. The instructor announces the switch of sides and comments with admiration that Demian's team will probably win the tournament in a sweep. The head instructor disagrees with that hasty prediction and seriously warns that he wouldn't be so sure about that. He points his finger towards a different match, indicating which team could cause major problems for the protagonist. The officer questions if the 4th platoon wouldn't be an excellent adversary to challenge Demian's victorious team. In the other arena, the soldiers of the rival squad stomp their feet on the ground, complaining of exhaustion and cursing the fight. The leader of the 4th platoon grumbles that this confrontation should have just been a warm-up before crushing Demian. He despairs, seeing that their tactics aren't working and that his group is losing badly on defense and running out of steam. Furious with the imminent failure, the young man shouts, demanding his comrades follow the plan's orders correctly. Revolted by the pressure, the soldiers shout back, telling the leader to fight, since he only barks orders from the rear. On the other team, the skilled Apel asks his leader, Gerard, if they should break the tired enemy defenses yet. The 14-year-old brilliantly assesses that they just need to pressure the shield bearers until they collapse on their own. Gerard agrees with the strategy and is amazed by the young man's ability to analyze the enemy's weakness so quickly. The leader watches Apel advance with his spear, becoming extremely curious about the prodigy's true origin. Staying focused on the tactic, Gerard commands everyone to hold the line firmly and focus on keeping pressure on the rival shields. The two platoons collide with extreme violence, creating an intense contest of pure strength and physical endurance in the yard. Impatient, the enemy captain calls the 3rd platoon cowards, telling them to stop messing around and fight for real. Gerard smiles, realizing the opponent's stamina and morale have dried up, leaving only a reckless attack from them. The awaited moment arrives when a rival soldier gasps and staggers, saying he doesn't have the strength to hold on anymore. With his eyes gleaming at the wide, open gap, Gerard orders an immediate all-out attack from the 3rd platoon. The recruits roar, advancing with a burst of energy to run over the shield line of their weak opponents. The 4th platoon's barrier cracks under the impact, forcing the warriors to retreat under their leader's desperate cries. In the midst of that pure chaos, Gerard calls Apol's name for the young man to finish the fight once and for all. With absurd lightness, the blonde boy skillfully runs across the dirt, preparing his spear for the decisive action. Apel uses the tops of the fallen enemy shields as a springboard, quickly leaping towards the arena's sky. The young man is suspended in the air, holding his shaft with mastery, ready to devastate the opponent's remaining defenses. He elegantly spins his body, creating a powerful whirlwind of pure energy around himself during the swift descent. The young man lands multiple sequential strikes with the tip of his spear, completely devastating the ranks of the desperate enemy. The leader of the 4th platoon grabs his fallen warriors, cursing them all and lamenting having such an incompetent team. Suddenly, he gulps, feeling a shiver of pure panic as his annoyed gaze meets the dark one of Demian. The mock combat finally ends with the instructor declaring the 3rd platoon's absolute victory. The recruits lift Apel up to celebrate, while the rival leader acknowledges that he will be a very tough opponent. Demian watches the scene from afar and concludes that the real final battle will be against the 3rd platoon. With a purple aura and an excited smile, the boy says he can't wait to face Apel in the grand finale. The short rest period ends, and the instructor orders all platoons to reassemble in the arena. Kyle comments to Demian that the next match is against the 4th platoon, and that this is their last chance. The big guy cracks his knuckles, eager to smash the face of the arrogant fool who offended his young leader. Demian analyzes their opponents, noticing they are completely exhausted and their teamwork is ruined. With a dark look, the boy decides not to go easy and plans to crush his rivals as quickly as possible. Demian's allies smile with a thirst for a fight, wanting the enemies to pay dearly for all the taunts. With a very serious expression, the protagonist demands total focus from the team to end this match in a flash. The squad's recruits agree immediately and eagerly await the boy's orders. The first platoon organizes firmly and perfectly aligned around the group's red flag. Meanwhile, the rival team holds the blue flag, showing strong fatigue even before the fight begins. The referee shouts the start of the match as Demian and the enemy leader exchange looks full of intense rivalry. Without wasting a single second, Demian's army advances quickly across the field, kicking up dust wherever it goes. The aerial view shows the first platoon's rapid approach against the enemy forces waiting still. The boy notices that the opponent's square formation is so sloppy that a simple frontal attack would be enough. Even so, he tightens his grip on his shield, determined to crush the enemies so perfectly they'll never rise again. Demian calls for the big guy, who lets out a beastly roar as he takes the lead of the army with extreme force. The brutality of the advance throws the defenders back, completely shocked by the inhuman strength of that monster. The enemy leader despairs once more, cursing his soldiers and telling them to use more force to block. In tears, the opposing captain shouts for the shield bearers to defend the flag while the spearmen attack. Suddenly, the protagonist leaps high, crossing the air and reminding the captain he would never forget the insults. The leader of the 4th platoon freezes in complete terror, seeing the terrible threat falling right on his head. With a relentless aerial attack, Demian lands a violent kick directly in the face of the terrified enemy leader. The strong impact knocks the opposing captain to his knees on the arena floor as the boy lands with style. Humiliated, the young man glares at the boy with hatred, warning that there's a limit to him underestimating others. He grips his own spear tightly and angrily asks if the protagonist thinks he's a scarecrow. In a fit of rage, the enemy leader charges with his weapon, certain he'll easily win in a direct duel. Demian parries the spear with extreme ease and thinks with a sigh how predictable that fool's movements are. The protagonist disarms the opponent in the blink of an eye, mockingly asking if that's all he's got. The captain of the 4th platoon stares at his own trembling hands, completely shocked at being disarmed so quickly. Walking calmly, the boy holds his spear and laments that the enemy dropped his weapon over such a small thing. Without showing any pity, Demian takes the captain down for good and violently steps on the fallen opponent's chest. With frightening eyes, the young man warns that dropping your weapon on the battlefield is the same as begging to be taken out. The boy envelops his own fist with pure mana, ordering his rival to never forget that important lesson. To ensure the message was understood, Demian slams the opponent's face into the ground with a powerful magic punch. The enemy is knocked out completely, while the protagonist sighs, thinking the whole fight was very boring. The official in charge observes the state of the rival squad and declares they are in no condition to fight anymore. The instructor raises his arm, preparing to make the long-awaited official announcement of the match's result. Demian proudly raises the enemy flag, and the referee finally declares the 1st platoon's absolute victory. With a huge, relieved smile, Kyle celebrates the triumph, stating that was to be expected from the genius Demian. The officials watch the enemy leader's rescue, astounded by the unreal skills of a 13-year-old boy. One of the instructors admits the boy is a true prodigy and perhaps stronger than the superiors themselves. Another official smiles, unable to disagree with that statement, until he feels an intimidating presence approaching. Curious about the sudden change in atmosphere, the man turns his head back, trying to understand who just arrived. A one-eyed man with a very intimidating appearance emerges on the field, revealing himself to be a famous special instructor from the kingdom. All the officers are startled by the unexpected visit and give a military salute with great respect. The feared visitor observes the arena and calmly asks Brian if that boy is the promising rookie he mentioned. Instructor Brian confirms to the one-eyed man that the young man was the standout of the training. The mysterious visitor gives an excited smile, noting that a very interesting recruit has joined them. Meanwhile, in the barracks, a cadet throws the door wide open, desperately shouting that this is crazy. Demian doesn't understand the commotion, and the young man explains, out of breath, that a very important guest has arrived at the fort. The rookie reveals that the man is a legendary instructor from the 3rd Division and that all the officers fear him. Curious about the information, Demian asks for the legend's name, but the cadet scratches his head. Trying to remember, the boy tries to guess the name Ryan Hart, and Demian's eyes immediately widen in total shock. With a choked voice, the protagonist whispers the name Leonhardt, dreading what it means. The young man taps his forehead, confirming the name, but Demian is already getting out of bed and running out in a hurry. Not understanding a thing, his colleague asks where Demian is going in such a rush. Ignoring his friend, the boy runs desperately through the empty corridors of the military camp. He breaks into a cold sweat, thinking he needs to confirm with his own eyes if that man is really who he thinks he is. Demian skids to a halt in the hallway, paralyzed with surprise as he comes face to face with the one-eyed instructor. The man with the eye patch notices his approach, and Officer Raymond points, revealing that this is Soldier Demian. Raymond opens his arms in a friendly manner, saying they were just on their way to the barracks to see him. The boy immediately composes himself and gives a perfect military salute, shouting, "Glory to the kingdom." The one-eyed giant asks if his name is really Demian, and the young man confirms, stuttering slightly. Demian remembers that the 3rd Division manages the camp, but thought he would only see this man in the future. Looking at the giant, the boy gets emotional upon reuniting with the master, who had the greatest impact on his past life. The master reveals he traveled here just to meet the recruit that the strict Raymond praised so much. Leonhardt observes the young man intently and notices that he already practices a decent mana training method. Praising the boy's spear technique, the Lord asks which unit he wishes to join after training. The young man gulps, hesitating for a moment before answering his former master's question. With a confident smile, Demian declares that he plans to join the feared and deadly Neocolis unit. The officer panics, asking if he's lost his mind, while the one-eyed man's eyes widen in surprise. The Neocolis unit is the most brutal division that faces monsters in the forest and suffers many casualties annually. Leonhardt questions why he chose such a difficult place, and the boy replies that he'll get stronger there. Liking the attitude, the master offers to write a recommendation for the knights. Startling the officer, Demian says thanks but declines the noble offer, assuring him he needs to go to the 3rd Division to find someone. Respecting the boy's firm decision, the one-eyed man tells him to return to the barracks to rest his body. Desperate, the officer grabs Demian and asks if he has any idea of the golden opportunity he just threw away. Raymond begs the visitor to try and convince the recruit again, thinking the boy made a terrible choice. Leonhardt denies the request, claiming the officer clearly didn't see the burning determination in that boy's eyes. The one-eyed master lets out a laugh, finding it all even more intriguing since he's only 13 years old. He asks the officer to leave the boy alone, knowing their paths will cross again in the future. The next day, the awaited final of the tournament between the 1st and 3rd platoons is about to begin. Demian motivates his team, assuring them that no other troop in the camp is capable of defeating them now. Kyle clenches his fists and agrees with the boy, feeling very confident in his squad's brute force. With a predatory look, the young leader smiles and orders them to crush their rivals, just like they always do. The two troops position themselves in the arena, while the referee announces that the 3rd platoon will start on offense. Demian shouts the order and raises his hand, calling his allies to assume an immediate defensive formation. The 1st platoon raises its barrier, and the rival leader Gerard notices. It's the same imposing defense from yesterday. Gerard whispers to Apple, reminding him that the blonde boy's role will be absolutely crucial for the plan to work. The opposing leader shouts the order to advance, and his shield bearers charge fiercely against the enemy barrier. The formations collide abruptly with a violent crash that makes the shield bearers grit their teeth from pure force. Dimian tells his allies to push back, and Gerard smiles, realizing they took the same bait as before. When his warriors start to give way in the test of strength, the third platoon's leader shouts Appel's name. Suddenly, the enemy formation opens right down the middle, revealing the isolated blonde boy with spear in hand. Dimian is confused to see the opponents giving up their own defense and wonders what they are plotting. The blonde boy wields his spear and prepares to begin his offensive move against Dimian's platoon. The young warrior strikes one of the opponent's shields with great force using his spear. Dimian watches the action, his eyes widening and breaking into a cold sweat as he notices the enemy's charge. Gerard shouts excitedly that the blonde boy's attack was a success and tells the platoon to advance through the gap. Kyle takes the lead of the attack and braces for impact, warning that he won't let them pass. The big guy uses all his brutal strength and blocks the advance, clashing shields violently. Dimian sighs in relief that Kyle managed to stop the enemy in time before the breach. The protagonist mentally praises Apel, impressed by his strength in pushing back the defenders. Appel retreats, surprised by the big guy's strength, questioning what that monster is doing on the field. The blonde boy notices Kyle's frightening gaze fixed on him and concludes that things have gotten difficult. Dimian had ordered in the barracks for the brute not to take his eyes off Appel for anything. The big guy had no idea who the opponent was, but agreed with the young man's strategy. With a macabre smile on his face, Kyle finally finds and locks his sights on the young blonde boy. Gerard asks if Appel can break through the barrier, and he confirms that he'll have to. The prodigy reflects that he can't beat the monster with brute force alone and changes his tactic. He decides to use his magic aura, enveloping the spear's shaft with an intense blue energy. The blonde boy jumps and attacks the big guy with a devastating blow, trying to break his defense. Kyle withstands the powerful attack, taking a few steps back under everyone's shocked gazes. Appel smiles with determination and warns that he'll keep striking nonstop until the brute gives way. The big guy grits his teeth, feeling the absurd pressure and the blonde boy's impressive strength. Appel continues to attack relentlessly, delivering multiple blows to the monster's barrier. With a majestic spin and his spear glowing, the young man announces that this will be the final blow. Kyle cowers behind his shield and prepares to withstand the tremendous impact of the magic attack. Dimian finally springs into action, sliding next to the big guy with his own shield. The protagonist blocks Appel's magic attack, using his mana and saving his comrade. The two young prodigies exchange intense gazes during the clash of their two weapons. The shrill sound of the whistle cuts through the air, immediately announcing the end of the time limit. Kyle and Dimian stop instantly, still processing the sudden end of that round. The instructor declares that the third platoon failed to capture the flag and decrees their defeat. Appel is frustrated and breathless, surprised that he couldn't take down the monster easily. Dimian approaches the big guy, panting, and asks with concern if his friend is hurt. The protagonist suggests Kyle rest, but his friend refuses, saying no bones were broken. The young man warns his friend that getting seriously hurt now could ruin his official graduation. Accepting the advice, the big guy agrees to protect the flag and leave the attack to Dimian. Kyle holds the flag firmly, ordering the young man to go crush the enemies for him. The instructor announces the change of sides and tells the first platoon to prepare for the final attack. Dimian knows everyone is tired, but wants to end the match without using all the remaining time. With a determined and very sharp look, the boy promises to finish everything in exactly 5 minutes. The protagonist fully activates his mana, covering his body with a powerful purple aura. On the other side, Gerard leads the defenders while the blonde boy Appel guards the flag behind them. Dimian is confident in victory and guarantees he will capture their prize before the time limit ends. The two great armies face each other on the vast battlefield, awaiting the order. The young hero holds his spear firmly, knowing this is the last match of the competition. He reflects that he has done everything as an interim leader and now needs to prove his individual worth. Dimian is ready to make the best possible impression on the strict instructors of the fort. With a smile on his face, the protagonist decides he will show his full power as just Dimian. The young man plans to defeat Apel and secure his recommendation as the camp's greatest talent. Dimian notices that Apel is personally guarding the flag due to his extreme exhaustion. The boy holds his spear, prepared for a direct and straightforward confrontation against the blonde boy. The instructor waves his hand and shouts, giving the signal for the awaited final match to finally begin. Dimian orders everyone to advance at maximum speed from the start, focused on following his lead. Dimian's platoon advances at extreme speed without breaking formation, leaving the enemies completely frightened. The rival leader Gerard senses the danger and shouts for his men to raise their shields against the boy. Dimian skillfully slides across the ground. While the enemy leader thinks that charge will amount to nothing, the boy concentrates powerful purple mana in his weapon, promising to pierce the opponent's defense at once. With an agile leap, the protagonist delivers a brutal attack, glowing with magic energy against the shields. The blow is so powerful that it pierces the enemy's solid defenses with ease, startling the rivals. Without giving them time to react, the young man spins his spear and strikes low, knocking down the warriors in front. With eyes burning with determination, the hero shouts for his team to charge through the created opening. The allied squad advances with full force, running over the enemies who desperately try to block the invasion. In the midst of that chaos, the skilled warrior spins his spear as the opponents try to fight back. The protagonist dodges nimbly and takes down another enemy recruit, clearing the path even more. Realizing the great threat, several opposing soldiers surround the boy, attacking him at the same time. The agile combatant delivers a swift leg sweep, hitting the opponent's ankle, who falls screaming in pain. Realizing the perfect moment, the leader shouts, demanding his entire platoon regroup immediately. Kyle appears, laughing, and smashes the enemies with his large shield, showing the raw strength of the first platoon. Gerard is amazed by the incredible speed of the advance but deduces that the boy is their true strength. The blonde prodigy coldly analyzes the situation, deducing that he just needs to hold back the leader to avoid defeat. Apel takes the lead of the army and asks his captain to guard the flag while he fights. The opposing captain grits his teeth, frustrated at having to depend on the strength of a mere child there. The young protagonist faces the approaching blonde boy. Knowing this will be the great final battle, Dimian recognizes the fearsome Apel, remembering that in the future he will become a giant general of the kingdom. The two greatest talents of the camp charge and begin to exchange fierce blows in the center of the arena. The protagonist smiles excitedly, seeing the perfect chance to test his own strength against a genius. The hero delivers a powerful blow to the ground, revealing that his first move was just a feint. With a sharp smile and gleaming eyes, the young warrior prepares his real surprise attack. Apel brutally counters using his blue magic, while the protagonist complements the weight of that attack. The spears, covered in magic mana, clash violently, creating sparks all over the battlefield. The blonde prodigy spins his weapon with extreme mastery, showing he is not the least bit shaken in the fight. Wielding his weapon with vigor, the protagonist taunts the talented rival, telling him to use everything he's got. Dimian jumps, delivering a violent magic attack, vowing to fight with all his strength to win. The boy unleashes multiple fast and precise strikes, forcing the blonde boy to dodge quickly. The hero notices his spear cracking and realizes with shock that the opponent's magic has overwhelming force. The young men retreat, and the protagonist wonders if this brilliant warrior also has a commoner origin. The blonde boy pants, staring at his rival, impressed by the absurd mana control that boy possesses. Apel sees his opponent as a gigantic wall, fearing such magical power in a simple camp. Exuding a lot of confidence, the leader of the first platoon calmly announces that he will end this. The hero charges furiously with his spear engulfed in magic energy, warning that his rival won't be able to block. The brutal charge completely shatters the young prodigy's defenses, sending him flying. The blonde warrior falls face first into the damp earth, cursing his weakness for losing the group's flag. With the base completely vulnerable, the coveted blue flag flutters, swaying in the strong winds of the arena. Dimian rips out the banner and raises it to the skies, shouting his team's great victory at the top of his lungs. Fallen on the ground, the young prodigy watches his powerful opponent celebrate while he pants, completely exhausted. Walking serenely, the victorious protagonist approaches his talented adversary on the ground. The boy extends his hand in a fine gesture of respect, and the rival smiles, vowing to win next time. The protagonist smiles, proposing they fight together in the future, as it would be very difficult to defeat him a second time. The hero wonders if this defeat will make the blonde boy train even harder, becoming a frightening monster in the future. Putting the future aside, the young leader prefers just enjoy the taste of this sweet victory with his allies. The experienced instructors watch it all, amazed by the boy's strength, vowing to train everyone hard. The legendary one-eyed master smiles, satisfied with the immense talent of his former student, agreeing with the idea. The recruits cheer with great emotion and toss their beloved hero into the air, celebrating the long-dreamed-of achievement. Kyle's eyes widen, unable to believe the abundance of food before him. The luxurious banquet with meats proves that winning the competition was worth it. Dimian watches his allies devour everything with great excitement and hunger. The young man silently laments that his former master has already left. Instructor Raymond approaches the table, asking if he can sit down. He asks if Damian still wants to refuse Leonhark's great offer. With a friendly smile, the officer laments the loss of this great chance. Raymond gets the boy's attention, revealing a very important detail. He says that the famous master also made the same offer to Appel. Dimian calmly replies that Appel's life belongs only to him. The officer bursts out laughing, calling the boy a drag for being so serious. Realizing the boy's firmness, the instructor gives up trying to convince him. Raymond raises a beautiful goblet to make a grand toast to the recruits. The instructor congratulates everyone for their effort, wishing them a bright future. Everyone raises their goblets in celebration, shouting glory to their great kingdom. Time flies by, and the third and final week of training begins. The recruits train intensely with their spears under the officer's shouts. Dimian happily observes that the attitude of all the soldiers has changed for the better. The rivalry of the great competition served to motivate the entire camp. After much effort, the officers finally announce a short break. Kyle pants from exhaustion and asks if the young leader has heard the gossip yet. The big guy says that many rookies from the 4th platoon were kicked out. He laughs, saying that the arrogant rival leader ran away like a coward. Dimian pulls his friend's shirt, reminding him that's not the most important thing right now. The young man warns that they still need to secure good individual scores. The protagonist remembers that everyone there dreams of an easy life in the palace. He warns that the few administrator positions create fierce competition. Kyle agrees, saying that the vast majority enlisted for the same reason. The brute despairs, asking if Damian also wants the palace. The boy calmly breaks free, denying any interest in that path. Dimian warns that the bureaucratic job would keep the big guy cooped up all day. Kyle considers that it would be suffocating, but thinks they should try for the best post. The leader warns that an active guy like Kyle would go crazy in a single month, understanding the sensible advice. The warrior asks where the young man will go. Dimian reveals with great firmness his desire to go to the Neocoles unit. The giant freaks out, shouting that the young master has completely lost his mind. Annoyed by the commotion, the protagonist kicks his gossiping friend's shin. The brute falls to his knees, laughing and saying he already suspected it. With a huge smile on his face, he praises his partner's adorable craziness. Time runs out, and the group celebrates having one less rival for the palace spots. The intense month of training finally comes to an end with the grand speech. Dimian smiles in relief, feeling that the arduous month passed in the blink of an eye. The commander concludes the ceremony, wishing a great future for everyone there. Suddenly, the surgeon in charge turns his head and calls the protagonist's name. The young men quickly get into formation, giving their last official salute. The surgeon announces the most awaited moment to call the best recruits. The young men swallow hard, anxiously waiting for the champion's announcement. The officer crowns Damian as the absolute leader, sparking a celebration among his allies. The brilliant blonde prodigy is announced next as the runner-up. The talented warriors take their place on the elite podium, ending the brutal event. The instructor asks the top 5 to follow him to receive a weapon from the armory as a grand reward. The The officer says they can choose any item from inside, starting with the grand champion, Dimian. The boy opens the heavy door with an excited smile, feeling his moment has finally arrived. Walking through the armory, the protagonist is surprised by the excellent organization of the vast place. He observes the magic potions on the shelves, wondering if there's any hidden treasure there. Realizing there's nothing hidden, the young man decides to just grab what he needs and leave quickly. His steps lead him to a specific target that caught his attention. Since he entered the large room, the hero reaches his hand toward a shelf, mentally celebrating that he found his item. He picks up a ring, remembering that this item grants temporary invisibility. When infused with mana, the warrior walks back satisfied, knowing the other rookies would never notice the magic ring. The officer tells Apple to go in, while the protagonist reflects that only the blonde boy could have noticed the item. The hero wonders if in his past life, the brilliant rival had chosen that exact special ring. Staring at the closed door, the young champion is very curious to see what the blonde boy will choose. To everyone's great surprise, the prodigy leaves the huge armory much faster than expected. Dimian's eyes widen in shock, wondering how his rival made such a quick decision in there. Kyle notices his friend's reaction and asks what's wrong, but the leader plays it off, saying it's nothing. The protagonist stares at the small seal in Apple's hands, absolutely certain of what that item was. That was the crest of an ancient fallen kingdom, making the hero connect the dots about his rival's strength. Analyzing the mysterious boy, the leader concludes that he might have a strong connection to that ancient kingdom. After some time, the instructor gets the group's attention, asking if everyone has chosen their weapons. The man notices Apple's seal, asking if he knows the item, and the blonde boy says he felt divine power. The officer smiles, confirming that it is indeed a seal imbued with the power to ward off misfortune. Satisfied, the instructor also praises the other boys' excellent choices of spear and shield. Turning his gaze to the grand champion, the man asks if he is really sure about that choice. The soldier explains that the ring only serves to reduce body weight, leaving the hero very confused. Realizing the boy didn't know, the instructor suggests he put the magic ring on his finger and test it. Dimian does an agile leap and smiles upon noticing he became much lighter and faster for future battles. The officer asks what he thought, and the young leader thanks him, saying the item exceeded his expectations. With a sharp smile, the boy discovers that the invisibility combined with the lightness makes it an A-rank item. The instructor ends the matter, telling everyone to go back and fill out their enlistment forms. In the room, the recruits start writing, and the officer tells the champion to fill out his as well. With the quill in hand, the skilled warrior writes with firmness that he wishes to go to the Neocolit's unit. The man watches the boy, mentally lamenting that he refused the glorious order of knights. Without hesitating for a single second, the young man finishes the form and hands it to his superior. The instructor asks the prodigy to be very careful, as that chosen destination is extremely hostile. The officer praises the boy's hard work, and the hero thanks him deeply for everything he learned there. The young leader leaves the instructor's room, walking alone through the quiet corridors of the camp. Reflecting on his imminent departure, he feels a tightness in his chest until he hears someone call him. The skilled Apple approaches hurriedly, revealing he overheard the hero's entire conversation with the officer. The blonde boy questions his reason for refusing the knights, and Dimian says he doesn't belong in that place. Clenching his teeth, the runner-up reveals that he accepted the great recommendation from instructor Leon Hark. The protagonist smiles, touching his friend's shoulder and assuring him he will be very successful among the nobles. The boy laughs at the irony of his rival, praising the place he himself refused, calling him unpredictable. Changing to a more serious tone, Apple asks the hero to be careful in that dangerous combat unit. The two greatest talents of the camp shake hands, smiling and promising to meet in the future. With a serene look and much confidence, the victorious protagonist thanks his former rival for the concern as he watches his comrade leave. Dimian wonders if he has any idea of his glorious destiny. The hero knows the boy will become a fearsome general and looks forward to seeing his strength in the future. Satisfied with that great ending, the champion decides to go say goodbye to his dear allies. The leader opens the barracks door to find all his faithful companions waiting for him. Kyle runs towards Dimian, calling his name loudly inside the spacious barracks. The The big guy hugs his friend, saying he thought he would leave without saying goodbye to anyone. The young protagonist smiles, saying they will see each other much sooner than he can even imagine. Kyle smiles widely and asks all the recruits to pay close attention to the leader's words. Demian thanks everyone for following his leadership and asks them to continue doing their best. The boys cheer with joy, wishing him much success and promising to meet up later. After the warm farewell, the hero walks silently with his heavy backpack on. Suddenly, a sweet voice calls his name as he crosses the huge camp gates. The beautiful Deal smiles friendly, reintroducing herself as a member of the Great Hamo Guild. The boy remembers when he visited the imposing guild building to conduct his business. That day, the employee read the contract, promising a great return on his investment. Reading the documents, the young prodigy was very impressed with that incredible organization. The attentive blonde offered space for questions, but the hero declined after seeing so much clarity. Demian told them to proceed with the terms, saying they would soon bring him the insurance money. The beautiful girl agreed and was about to show the detailed contract, but the confident boy interrupted her. The hero smiled friendly, claiming to fully trust her competence to handle everything. DL was silent for a brief moment, impressed by that boy's unique personality. In the present, the employee opens an exquisite box containing the precious investment fund. The woman's eyes widen in total shock at the absurd fortune that was inside. The boy points out that the promise was 300 coins, but there's much more than 500 here. Desperate, the girl says she'll need to review the entire contract, but the hero says it's not necessary. Demian thinks that she could have taken advantage of his young age, but acted with complete honesty. Back at the camp, the woman asks which military unit the talented young man will be sent to. Closing his eyes, the protagonist calmly replies that he is going to the no-call-its unit. Deal despairs, finding it absurd that the best recruit is going to such a dangerous place. Exuding pure confidence, the boy gives a sharp smile, saying that if he's taken out, everything will go to her. The mood quickly becomes heavy, and the woman scolds the young man, saying she doesn't like that kind of joke. The hero gulps, surprised to notice that this gentle woman can also be scary. Changing the subject, the young woman asks about his departure date, and he reveals he'll leave in just 3 days. The guild representative nods in relief, bowing to assure him the gold will be put to good use. As she leaves, the young prodigy reflects happily that this whole big problem has been solved. Knowing he'll soon be in a hellish forest, the boy decides to just eat and enjoy his days. The young man enjoys the rest of his stay, devouring a lot of meat and drinking in the streets of the big city. Time flies by, and the hero reads his map at the forest entrance, feeling it's time to go. With his heavy backpack, the warrior knows he brought the right items and now just needs to get going. Suddenly, the boy hears hurried footsteps approaching and turns his head, extremely confused. Kyle appears out of nowhere, bursting into laughter and reminding him that he said they would see each other soon. Demian stares at the big guy in total disbelief, refusing to believe what he was seeing. The giant grabs his partner firmly, saying their friendship wouldn't end so easily. Kyle smiles, saying he also requested a transfer to the dangerous Neocolites to fight alongside him. The two friends walk together towards the dense forest, talking excitedly about the future. A mysterious voice tells the two boys to wait. Catching the inseparable warriors by surprise, Dial appears, panting, and sighs with great relief for having managed to catch up to them in time to help. The protagonist questions the reason for that surprise visit while admiring something giant behind her. The beautiful girl points excitedly to the huge luxury carriage she prepared for the hero's journey. The dedicated blonde lists the various provisions she arranged, leaving the boy quite confused. She smiles and points at him, saying it's a small gift for the sincerity he showed. The woman looks down shyly, saying she spent the last 2 whole days arranging it. The hero and the big guy are perplexed by such generosity, while the young woman asks them to take care. Demian says goodbye, confused. remembering that the carriage was a future investment he had promised. Demian bursts out laughing and concludes that the beautiful girl is a terrible liar, but much more interesting than he thought. The protagonist bids farewell to the young representative and walks calmly towards his destination with Kyle. With everything ready for the long journey, the two young warriors climb into the luxurious carriage offered by the guild. The beautiful blonde watches the imposing carriage move away on the horizon, silently wishing them good luck. The huge vehicle moves quickly through the arid lands, taking a shortcut to the brave soldiers' final destination. Kyle almost gets sick from the strong jolts of the road, while the leader deduces they would have been done for if they had come on foot. The duo spots the garrison guards, realizing they've finally arrived in Urkel, but finding the empty streets strange. Demian stretches his tired body and deduces that the residents either fled from the monsters or are working in the forest. The boy remembers that the vast majority of residents survive only by harvesting medicinal herbs in that area. He knows the powerful plant is extremely poisonous, but becomes a great pain reliever after being refined. The young man jumps from the vehicle, remembering that the region cannot abandon the dangerous harvest to supply the kingdom. With heavy backpacks on, the determined protagonist calls his partner to go to their new base right away. The great friends walk silently through the dark and deserted streets of that strange, abandoned city. The big guy gulps, feeling a very heavy aura in the air and hoping it's not what he's thinking. The duo faces a huge, ruined fortress covered in a dark mist, confirming it's their new base. The hero doubts anyone could live in such a rotten building and notices a strong smell of blood in the air. Frightened by the place's atmosphere, the giant warrior warns his great friend that some people are approaching. The two young soldiers watch attentively as a strange and large group of men emerges from the dense fog. The mysterious troop turns out to be a squad of exhausted soldiers, carrying their severely injured comrades. The warriors' worn-out armor clearly displays the imposing official emblem of the terrible Neocolit's unit. The protagonist coldly observes the suffering of his new base comrades, walking with great difficulty. The injured men slowly enter through the main gate of the fortress, plunging into the deep darkness. Kyle is terrified by the scene, asking why everyone there looks like actual phantoms, and the young hero sighs. Without looking away, the champion tells his friend to get used to it, as this is a place where you fight for your life every day. The brave boy closes his eyes, trying to understand why he's remembering his own past right now. In his past life, the veteran warrior taught the younger soldiers, asking what their greatest duty was. The recruits would answer, smiling, that it was to obey orders or take down the nation's enemies. Bringing everyone along, the bitter warrior listened to the excited answers of those little children, maintaining a sad silence. The instructor would give the young soldier a hard slap on the head, who would complain of pain without understanding the sudden fury. The powerful captain revealed that answer was the worst possible, teaching that the great objective is not to fall. With a dark look, he demanded his subordinates value their own lives and survive at all costs. The master stated that everyone should become frighteningly strong just so they wouldn't fall in the brutal combats. Back in the present, the boy smiles bitterly, remembering that all those beloved students were lost in the end. Without further hesitation, the brave protagonist moves forward, telling his partner to follow him into that grim fortress. The boy states sternly that they traveled here to get stronger and can't waste a single second. Fearing the worst, the big guy remembers the dark faces of the soldiers, suggesting they wait for a calmer moment. Completely ignoring the giant's fears, the determined warrior continues walking towards the dangerous garrison. The brute curses his best friend's immense stubbornness and runs desperately so as not to be left alone in the street. Inside the building, a furious soldier kicks some boxes, in tears, cursing the attitude of the garrison's leaders. The furious warrior shouts that the leadership tricked them, as there were more than 30 brutal orcs setting up an ambush. A man warns that his friend's arm is about to fall off and he'll be kicked out if he doesn't receive urgent medical treatment. The criminals sent to that cursed squad can never be expelled for mere injuries. The tragic fate for all of them is to rot forever in the cold dungeons or fight until they fall in that place. The only way out the nobility gives to the dirty military dregs is to be devoured by the dangerous beasts of the region. With great hatred, the man bellows that the poor injured young man will never be able to survive in the world without one of his arms. The wise and serene Commander Tar-on appears, telling them to calm their nerves and find a good doctor and a strong priest. The soldier despairs, asking if the captain has forgotten the absurd price those blasted holy mages charged. The great leader throws a heavy bag of gold coins on the bed, telling them to use it all to save their comrade. The subordinates shout in shock, knowing the leader was saving that for his sick mother, but the man just smiles. The entire platoon looks at the humble and brave officer, overcome with great sadness for the pain of not being able to help more. Several other soldiers also approach the bed, throwing in their precious savings to help. The youngest member of the squad offers his coins, while a veteran yells at him. The older soldier tells the boy to keep that money to buy new boots for himself. The boy starts to cry, clutching the coins and saying his colleague got hurt because of him. With a gentle look, the veteran praises the boy while Commander Tar-on tells them to call a priest. The leader takes the opportunity and asks the young soldier's age as he runs to the door. The boy replies that he is 18, and the leader reflects that it's been a year since he enlisted. Tar-on prays for the injured to hold on until another man enters, shouting for the commander. The panting soldier announces loud and clear that the new recruits have finally arrived. The veteran and the other warriors turn instantly with frightening, glowing eyes. Tar-on sighs tiredly, admitting he had completely forgotten about the rookies due to the great battle. The great commander immediately calls the young recruit to give him a new order. The veteran starts to carry the injured man with another ally, disappearing down the corridors. Before leaving, the wise leader tells his youngest soldier to go greet his successors. In the main room, Tar-on attentively observes the pair of rookies who have just arrived at his base. The commander analyzes Kyle and concludes that his brute force will be very useful in the bloody fights. However, the great leader shifts his gaze and begins to seriously stare at the young hero before him. The experienced warrior questions if Damian is only 13 years old, and the boy confirms. The man is startled, knowing the hero is 5 years younger than the youngest in that terrible base. The leader reads the rookie's papers, stating he can't understand what goes on in children's heads. Kyle proudly intervenes, revealing that his great friend was the best recruit in the camp. The commander smiles, warning that scores mean nothing, as this place is a true inferno. Damian says he already knew that, and the leader questions the big reason he came anyway. Without prolonging the matter, the officer shouts, calling the young soldier who runs into the room. Tar-on orders the recruit to show the boys the barracks and have them clean everything perfectly. The young soldier just nods in confirmation and calls the pair of rookies to follow him. The silent trio walks slowly through the long corridors of that dark and ruined fortress. The guide explains that there are no ranks there besides the commander and his faithful vice commander. He points out that the entire hierarchy of the base is defined only by who arrived first. The soldier presents the room, telling them to pick any bed, since they won't be using them for long. Kyle is extremely confused and asks what those strange and morbid words meant. The soldier reveals that he's been there for a year, but is surprisingly still the newest member of the troop. A tragic scene of a great takedown flashes through the warriors' minds, bringing a very heavy mood. The young guide's eyes tremble with fear as he musters the courage to tell the sad reality. The recruit grimly explains that all the people who arrived after him ended up perishing. An absolute silence fills the room as the rookies digest that shocking information. The soldier sighs and tells the duo to clean the whole room before he continues his explanations. The young man leaves, slamming the door and leaving the new warriors alone in that dirty room. Kyle sits down furiously, cursing the soldier for dropping such a tragic piece of information right away. Kyle notices Damian's smile and indignantly asks the real reason for that sudden joy. The hero recalls his past, thinking to himself that his dear friend is still the same. Ignoring his partner, the young warrior grabs a cloth, telling Kyle to focus only on the exhausting cleaning. Demian analyzes the mess, smiling and saying that if they have to clean, they'll do the job right. With a wide and excited smile, the protagonist declares this will be their first great mission. The hero tells his partner to make everything spotless, while Kyle yells in revolt that he's not a cleaner. In the silent canteen of the garrison, the young soldier sits alone, exuding deep worry. The boy closes his eyes tightly, admitting to himself that he is very afraid of everything. He recalls how painful it is to see new friends arrive and fight together in the bloody battles. The past comes to mind as he remembers asking a former recruit to watch his brutal fight. On that fateful mission, the soldier asked his dear friend to stay behind in total safety. The fallen soldier realizes too late that a single moment of inattention on the battlefield costs you your own life. The fallen warrior reflects before the mangled bodies and graves that the Neocolits unit is exactly this kind of place. With a fixed and empty gaze, the soldier confesses he stopped looking after the rookies because he knew they would all perish anyway. Diana looks at the newly arrived pair, admitting that their presence deeply bothers him, especially the boys. Sitting in the workshop, the young man reflects that the boy looked at him with great familiarity until he was interrupted by the base's blacksmith. The young soldier gets up, thanking him for the service, and leaves a few coins on the counter before grabbing his repaired boots. The worker comments on two lost boys who were in front of the base and asks if they were the new recruits. With a pitiful expression, the man states that the pair looked so useless he almost mistook them for a defense team. Without paying much attention to the shopkeeper's comments, the young warrior gives a polite bow and promises to come back another time. Walking back to the barracks, Diana decides he needs to break the rookie's spirit and hope immediately. The young man knows perfectly well that useless feelings like motivation and pride are things that only cause people to fall in that place. He slowly opens the heavy door of the room, absolutely certain that the newcomers failed miserably in the order to clean everything. The veteran's eyes widen in total shock, unable to believe the impossible scene right in front of him. With a dirty face and a cloth on his head, the smiling boy notices his senior's arrival, pausing his intense and heavy cleaning. The soldier is completely frozen at the door upon seeing the two rookies scrubbing the floor of a room that was already sparkling. Two other warriors appear behind him, quite startled, asking how hard the recruit went on those boys. Breaking into a cold sweat, and still paralyzed by the great surprise, the young man stammers, replying that he actually did absolutely nothing. The small protagonist approaches, holding a bucket, and excitedly asks his shocked superior to evaluate all their effort. Diana stares at the impeccable barracks, remembering that rookies usually shirk work, and starts to form a grand theory. Trembling with frustration, the veteran comes to believe that this exaggeratedly shiny cleaning is a form of clever defiance. Suddenly, the young man's train of thought is broken by a very loud and cheerful laugh echoing behind the dumbfounded soldiers. The great leader Taron bursts out laughing, praising the doe's excellent work and saying the place looks brand new. The warriors in the background whisper, quite shocked to see a big smile from the terrifying man who never showed emotion. With a friendly and satisfied smile, the experienced commander waves his hand, telling the new recruits to approach. The great leader looks at them with curiosity, asking if they were really the ones who cleaned everything, and the duo confirms excitedly. The man deepens the question, asking why they cleaned so intensely when it would have been much easier to pretend they did. The boy promptly replies that it was an order from Soldier Dianel, and that they had to follow all orders from a superior. The commander looks at the rookies, reflecting that his long life fighting on battlefields taught him how to analyze anyone. Looking at a panting Kyle, the leader immediately deduces that the giant would be ready for battle with very little training. However, he looks at the boy, confessing he can't read him and doesn't understand why the best cadet would come to suffer in this place. Feeling there's a strong reason for volunteering, the commander interrupts his thoughts and demands everyone's attention. The experienced veteran takes a step forward in the sparkling room and faces his silent soldiers who await more orders. With great firmness, the leader pulls the two recruits close, announcing they are the youngest of the bunch and telling them to welcome them. During the cold night in the dark barracks, the soldier lies in his bed and quietly asks Damian if the war will ever end. The brave boy is silent for a moment before calmly replying that the conflict would end if they surrendered. The downcast veteran closes his heavy eyes and sadly asks the boy to promise he won't fall before him. Back in the present time, Damian asks if his friend ate something bad to be talking nonsense, and the partner insists on the promise. The calm boy smiles, resting his head on his arms, and thinks to himself that he kept that old promise in a twisted way. A sad memory shows the veteran's body pierced by enemy blades, falling right in front of the shocked protagonist. In that bitter moment of the past, the powerful young warrior glared at his brutal opponents with absolute hatred in his eyes. The furious hero leaps, spinning his spear with full force to decimate the culprits and show that he really did outlive his friend. Returning to the present time, the shaken recruit focuses on the ceiling of his silent, dark room and quietly curses in frustration. Giving up on sleep, the boy messes up his hair and concludes that training his mana cultivation will be his best alternative. The young soldier walks through the dark surroundings of the base, calmly venturing into the mysterious forest at dawn. The skilled young man hears a distant sound and watches from the shadows, wondering who the crazy person training at this hour would be. Peeking through the huge bushes, the boy discovers that the persistent lone swordsman was none other than the young Dianol. The protagonist remains hidden, observing the veteran's strength and concluding that he was already a huge training fanatic. Noticing his partner's extreme exhaustion, Damian realizes how incompatible that giant sword is for Dianol's speed. With a confident smile, the boy is amused, thinking that his proud partner would try to hit him if he suggested changing weapons. The next beautiful morning, all the recruits face the mountain as the leader announces the day's brutal physical endurance training. A warrior smiles, saying he's bored, and proposes a bet to his colleagues on the rookies' endurance. The veterans start throwing their silver coins, betting that the poor boys will pass out before the training is over. Kyle notices the activity and gets furious when he realizes the men are actually using them as betting targets. Damian observes that no one tries to stop this behavior, reflecting on how messed up the atmosphere of this place is. Ignoring his partner, the young protagonist calmly walks towards the betting circle, leaving the giant confused. With a sharp and very innocent look, the brave newcomer approaches the group, asking to join the fun. The veterans are initially startled, but soon break into a big smile, thinking they'll get money out of this kid. The hero confirms he has money, but suggests slightly changing the terms of the contest, making the men curious. Showing a valuable gold coin, the prodigy bets that he will surpass everyone in the training and come in first place. The arrogant warriors laugh mockingly, finding the bet absurd and asking if he wants to add more. The veteran smiles, impressed by the fighting spirit, and agrees to hand over all the silver if the rookie really wins. However, the warrior demands that the pair of rookies wash everyone's laundry for a month if they lose the bold physical challenge. The leader of the rookies accepts the huge risk, but asks to include just one more small condition in this big bet. The boy demands a month of free time during training if he wins, leaving the men shocked by such audacity. Suddenly, the commander appears right behind the soldiers and accepts the boy's absurd terms with a smile on his face. Walking across the yard, the great leader turns his head and immediately calls the name of the warrior who was guiding the boys. With a friendly and very firm smile, the experienced captain orders the young Dianol to also participate in this bet. The young man hesitates, quite surprised, and the man taunts him, asking if he's afraid of losing to a newcomer. Narrowing his eyes, the proud soldier denies the fear, stating it's just a huge waste of money to join this. Understanding his skilled subordinate's situation, the leader smiles, tossing a beautiful coin to pay his fee. The man looks at the protagonist and promises to honor the audacious agreement of free time if he humiliates the old veterans. Turning his head, the leader warns with a scary look that all the losers will face a terrible extra training. The furious veterans grit their teeth, staring at the newcomer and promising to use all their brutal force to crush him. The protagonist smiles with his head down, celebrating that his brilliant plan to stir up their spirit worked. He knows he needed to use the bet to pull the despair out of that cursed squad and force them to improve. With the great mood of rivalry created, the smiling commander announces the start of the physical training to the troop. Pointing to heavy wooden logs, the officer orders everyone to run carrying them to the mountain peak. The men complain about the absurd difficulty, demanding that only the rookies suffer through it, but they get a scolding. Exuding extreme fury, the powerful warrior tells everyone to shut up and grab the logs to start the test. The entire squad begins the terrible and grueling climb, carrying an absurd weight over the rocks of the huge mountain. A veteran pants, dripping with sweat from the great effort, while the brilliant protagonist follows him without showing fatigue. The formidable leader watches the climb from a rock while the soldiers question the change in the exercise. An experienced soldier struggles to climb, deducing that the officer did this just to make the two arrogant cadets pass out. Still panting, the man turns his head to check if the boy passed out, but is startled to realize he's gone. Completely in shock, the exhausted veteran raises his gaze, fearing the painful answer he would find above. To the general despair of the troop, the young hero appears, jumping over rocks far ahead of the entire rival group. The protagonist sighs calmly and displays absurd strength, carrying the huge log with just one hand. Looking at his own hand, the brilliant fighter discovers that his wonderful magic ring also affects objects. With a beautiful smile of great satisfaction, the boy celebrates having made the perfect choice in the army's grand armory. Quite curious about the progress of his bold bet, the calm cadet turns his head to look for his opponents. The prodigy notices the group has fallen behind, but is impressed to see there is only one warrior catching up to him. The hero recognizes the hard-working Dianel, climbing the mountain with great hatred in his eyes, proving his rigorous training. From the top of the quarry, the calm and relaxed protagonist just watches the silent suffering of the determined, proud one. The persistent warrior grits his teeth, glaring at the boy, knowing he is very close to the great victory. Far away, a frightened soldier appears, desperately shouting for his formidable commander in the central area of the barracks. Drenched in sweat, the man points to the top of the large base, asking his busy captain to observe a very bad sign. The wise veteran's eye widens, freezing in deep terror as he spots and understands the reason for the soldier's despair. A frightening red flag waves over the building, indicating the worst degree of emergency that can exist in the world. At the fortress gates, a small group of villagers arrives, bringing an air of nightmare and dread to the entire squad. The commander comes down the stairs, demanding to know the reason for the alarm, and the commoner says innocent people have perished in the dangerous forest. Tar-On quickly enters the room, asking who the victims were and the exact location of the attack. The soldier explains, annoyed, that there's no confirmation on the scale of the damage or the type of monster. The officer questions how it's possible they don't know the monster, since the commoners travel with 6 mercenaries. Exuding much frustration, the commander asks how many men can go to the forest right now. The leader orders them to gather 50 warriors as quickly as possible and leave the injured out. The veteran reflects with concern if the forest is changing, as the attacks are becoming more and more frequent. In the garrison yard, the officer confirms that the entire battalion is now properly assembled and prepared. Bathed in sunlight, the majestic leader climbs a step, telling everyone to grab their heavy weapons. The young protagonist appears right behind, stating with great firmness that he and his friend are also going along. The commander immediately denies permission, reminding him that fearsome real combat is different from training. Kyle appears, smiling, assuring them the duo can act as carriers and reminding them of their strength. Tar-On closes his eyes, frustrated at having to depend on the strength of mere cadets who just arrived at the base. Wise leader allows the duo to go on the condition that they do not enter the dangerous conflict against the beasts. The experienced officer calls his subordinate and tells him to give all the extra equipment to the rookies. The boy puts on the equipment, remembering the soldiers' talk about a supposed demon in the forest. The veteran's dark voice echoes in his memories, revealing the existence of something terrible in the region. In the yard, the boy scoffs at the possibility of a demonic monster being responsible for the attacks. The veteran reports having seen with his own eyes a possessed orc brutally beating a steel wolf. The warrior explains, trembling with fear, that the garrison had no choice but to give up that location, clenching his fists with hatred. The soldier claims the unit would have never broken if it weren't for that. Back in the present, the recruit shakes his head in frustration because the scattered information doesn't make sense. With no choice, the young prodigy focuses on being a mere carrier while accompanying the strange troops. The formidable commander shouts, demanding to know if all the strong soldiers have their equipment in order. The man starts walking, dictating that during the operation, they must consider any possibility of failure. The wise captain tells the battalion to avoid unnecessary dangers and focus entirely on coming back alive. The protagonist watches the squad march towards the great gates, celebrating the end of the long wait. With a slight smile and excited look, the cadet reflects that this will be his first real combat. Entering the dense forest, the leader orders the formation of groups of 3, telling them to search carefully. The captain calls the pair of rookies and tells them to follow him very closely for their own safety. The curious protagonist examines the environment, feeling that this restricted forest seems extremely normal. Suddenly, the young man's eyes gleam with alarm, feeling a terrible killing intent exuding in the air. As a great veteran of countless wars, the hero's instincts warn him that this scenario is very wrong. The young cadet tightens his grip on his large spear, feeling in his bones that this place is an absolute danger zone. Suddenly, a dreadful hiss echoes through the dark forest, paralyzing the entire battalion. At that very moment, the garrison captain quickly turns his head, questioning if his valued scouts found anything. The panting scout runs towards his leader, asking him to immediately see the disturbing scene. In a clearing soaked in red, the tragic body of a collector and her mercenaries lie on the ground. The captain holds a discarded sword, analyzing that the scouting team must have been in great fear to flee. The leader looks at the thick, uprooted trees in the area, wondering what absurd creature could cause this. One of the soldiers points to the claws embedded in the hard wood, suggesting the culprit is a powerful bear monster. The officer immediately dismisses it, stating that no bear in that cursed region possesses such destructive power. A silence dominates the destroyed camp as everyone is confused, trying to solve the great mystery. Suddenly, the young rookie walks away, finding the huge and blood-red carcass of a red bear thrown aside. Analyzing the brutal wound on the beast's body, the boy concludes that the enemy's paws must be gigantic. The experienced young man points to the large trees, assuring that all of this perfectly explains the carnage. The skilled leader of the garrison praises the prodigy's analysis, asking where he learned to make such a reading. Without showing any emotion, the hero coldly lies, saying his beloved father was a formidable local hunter. Kyle looks at his great friend, completely confused, remembering that the recruit's father was actually a proud soldier. The giant gasps in shock right after receiving a deep and threatening look from his partner, telling him to shut up. The leader orders the team to collect all the poor bodies, as the main focus now is to deliver them to their families. Demian agrees, thinking that advancing further now would be a real suicide mission without knowing who the enemy is. The protagonist smiles in relief, concluding that this gruff man is truly an excellent commander. Tar orders the entire battalion to retreat immediately and tells the injured to hurry their pace. Suddenly, the hero's eyes widen in surprise as he hears a loud noise coming from the trees up high. The cadet wields his spear in a quick reflex and shouts a warning for the entire squad to be very careful. A gigantic rock plummets from the heights and smashes into the ground, kicking up dust and injuring several warriors. A soldier cries in pain with a crushed leg while his partners despair. Not understanding the attack, the agile protagonist runs at high speed, calling the big guy to help him with the great emergency. Kyle obeys immediately and uses all his enormous brute strength to try to lift the crushing boulder. With glowing eyes, the prodigy concentrates his strong mana in his hands, trying to help lift the weight. Using immense strength, the pair of rookies manages to create a small opening under the giant rock. The brave warriors tell the squad to hurry and pull the injured soldier out of danger. The battalion pulls the man's injured body out from under the crush with extreme difficulty and desperation. The commander analyzes the serious injuries, and the hero approaches, handing him a strange magic plant. The boy tells the injured man to chew the herbs well to suck out all the liquid, and thus relieve the strong pain. Tar-on gets irritated, slapping the plant away, revealing it's a mancho and has an extremely fatal poison. The boy points to special seeds, saying that chewing them together nullifies all the poison and focuses on healing. The leader is perplexed by such knowledge while the poor man chews everything desperately. Demian alerts his officer that they need to retreat, as that rock was thrown by something very close. A huge crash makes the ground tremble, and the duo turns their heads, breaking into a cold sweat before the threatening presence. A colossal black beast emerges from between the trees with bloodshot eyes, exuding a frightening aura. The soldiers freeze in absolute terror, revealing they have never seen such a monstrous black bear. Showing courage, the great commander shouts, demanding the entire garrison prepare for battle. The battalion advances, joining their swords and spears against the monstrous animal in a very dangerous charge. The huge bear delivers a violent attack with its sharp claws, cutting the wind in a single swipe. The leader shouts for his men to dodge as the beast advances, throwing the poor cadets far away. Focused on winning, Tar-on tells them to get the injured out of the way and orders a strong attack on the bear's legs. A fearless soldier wields his heavy axe, asking to take on the dangerous attack himself. The brave warrior swings his huge silver blade with all the fury of his body against the creature. The brutal axe hits the animal's leg, causing a strong, bloody impact in the center of the fight. The shock surprises the young man, revealing that the monster's tough hide didn't even suffer a serious scratch. The captain shouts, asking for focus, as he sees his subordinate frozen while the creature turns against him. Back at the camp, the leader tells the cadet to sit in the office for a very serious conversation. The man asks if he knows the real reason that Giant Bear has such strange black spots. The small recruit answers with great clarity, believing it to be a strong case of demonic corruption. Tar-on is startled, asking if the hero is referring to the fearsome forbidden powers of the dark mages. Breaking into a cold sweat, the captain questions if this means terrible mages are hiding in this forest. Demian dismisses a certainty, remembering that the dangerous energy could also come from an abyssal creature. Demonic energy comes from worship, and those who are exposed to it too much end up having a disastrous end. The hero reflects that the region had a demonic stone, but this was happening too soon. In his other life, the existence of this terrible stone was only revealed after the Empire scored the forest. With very trembling eyes, the boy thinks that this current disaster might just be the beginning of the ruin. The corruption grows stronger with time, so they must destroy the energy before it becomes a nightmare. Coming to his senses, the officer questions how the young man knows all this, and he lies, citing his late father. The suspicious captain approaches seriously, demanding the boy tell him the details of this story. He reminds him that the garrison needs all possible information to win, and the boy agrees. The next day, the sky dawns peacefully, and the protagonist wakes up complaining of severe body aches. The recruit sighs, exhausted from the previous mission, and tries to wake up his great partner, who is drooling in his sleep. Suddenly, a soldier throws the room's door wide open, shouting in shock about some big news. The man announces that the entire forest has been closed off to soldiers, and even to collection teams. The soldiers celebrate happily that for now, they will only be doing training without going on dangerous missions. Kyle notices his friend's tense expression and asks if he isn't happy about this moment of rest. The young leader hides his face, agreeing that the rest is great but questioning why it's happening right now. Heavy footsteps catch the boy's attention, who turns confused to see who is walking by. A soldier hides, watching the garrison march through the base, and wonders what those lazy people are doing there. In the commander's room, an important officer from the garrison waits, sitting with his arms crossed and a serious look. Tar-on approaches his desk, directly asking what brings the garrison to his dangerous base. The officer reveals that thanks to the report, the temple agreed to cooperate upon sensing a malevolent aura on the carcass. The commander is surprised, thinking if the recruit was right about the forest being connected to demonic energy. The officer warns that nothing is certain yet, so they decided to send a priest and start a large joint search operation. The man from the garrison demands that the soldier who knows about the demonic energy be taken along in this unusual situation. The officer hesitates upon learning he's just a rookie, but acknowledges that he was the one who discovered the big problem. The experienced captain thinks to himself that if they refuse the request, they will suffer great unfair treatment later. With no other options, the wise Tar calls his faithful subordinate Aaron to give a new order. The leader tells Aaron to fetch Damian immediately, while the boy is seen in his room letting out a long, frustrated sigh. On the way to the room, the boy reflects that he doesn't want to lose the favor he gained, as he intended to tell the truth at the right moment. A recent memory from the past shows the giant black bear swinging its claws violently at a soldier. The terrified warrior has no time to react and is hit head-on by the brutal beast's crushing attack. The strong impact of the blow sends the poor man flying while he rolls powerlessly on the forest floor. The frightening red-eyed monster advances relentlessly towards the fallen soldier who groans in pain on the ground. The colossal beast raises its huge, bloodied paw, ready to deliver the cruel final blow to the defenseless warrior. In a heroic charge, Captain Tar appears, blocking the deadly attack with his sword and saving the soldier. The commander analyzes the injured with hatred and vows that he will not let that cursed monster leave the forest alive. Exuding an overwhelming fury, the great leader shouts, demanding his entire squad continue attacking. The brave soldiers surround the bear, delivering spear strikes while complaining about the creature's tough hide. In the midst of the chaos, a warrior alerts Kyle and Damian to fall back and not get involved in the dangerous combat. The skilled commander advances against the beast, shouting for his strong subordinate Dianel for a joint attack. The loyal soldier leaps, delivering a violent slash with his sword and severing the bear's arm with great precision. The black bear roars in complete agony as blood spurts from its huge, newly amputated arm in the battle. Seizing the opening, Captain Tar attacks fiercely and knocks the creature to the ground with his brute force. With a lethal gaze, the experienced warrior faces the monster, coldly declaring that this is its end. The young protagonist's eyes widen in surprise as he feels a strong concentration of mana coming from his leader. The captain jumps, plunging his glowing energy-filled sword directly into the monster's chest. With a fatal blow, the soldiers laugh in relief, kicking the animal's carcass and celebrating their squad's great victory. Tar approaches the fallen body, touching the beast's hide and wondering where such a bizarre bear came from. The commander rubs his fingers on the strange black spots marked on the great slain beast's face. A soldier approaches, concerned, suggesting the spots might be a deadly, highly contagious plague. The small Damian observes the marks from afar, confirming to himself that they are exactly what he feared. The cadet concludes that there is only one explanation for the sudden appearance of such an abnormal creature in that location. With his eyes glowing with determination, the boy thinks they need to find the origin of this immediately. The captain tells Aaron to watch the area and orders Brent to skin the bear to use for making armor. Surprising everyone, the rookie interrupts the order, seriously warning that they cannot use that hide. The wise leader turns his head, staring at the boy coldly and demanding to know what he meant by those words. The boy approaches seriously, and the commander states that he already suspected the newcomer knew something about the monster. Tar tells the squad to drop the hide to return to base and asks the young rookie to pay close attention. The captain demands the recruit follow him immediately while the soldiers observe the fallen beast in the forest. Back at the camp, the memory ends, and the great stone walls of the base once again dominate the scene. The hero finally arrives at the captain's room, noticing the garrison soldiers and wondering what they are doing there. The boy walks past the soldiers with a tense expression, internally hoping the situation isn't what he thinks it is. Commander Tar calls the boy, revealing that the operation in the forest is the main reason for calling him. Damian's eyes widen, quite surprised to hear from his great commander that he can simply refuse the mission. Commander Tar calmly explains that the recruit has the right to refuse if he doesn't want to participate. The The young protagonist smiles and accepts the great mission, warning that if not now, it might be too late. The experienced commander steps back a bit, looking quite confused by the young recruit's sudden response. With a confident look, the boy states that his presence will greatly increase the chances of finding the monster. The garrison officer agrees with the idea, and the wise leader dismisses the recruit to prepare. The young hero shows a wide smile and thumps his chest, guaranteeing that he perfectly understood his new order. Walking in the yard, the commander asks with great concern if the boy will be okay going alone. The leader offers to send some veterans along, but the young man smiles, declining the help and preferring to go alone. The prodigy smiles very innocently, justifying that it will be much easier to escape alone if things go south. The experienced leader sighs heavily and demands that the recruit keep in mind that fighting is strictly forbidden. The boy assures him not to worry and promises to take the opportunity to gather many herbs for the group. With great confidence, the hero vows he will return safely and walks away, leaving the leader watching. The garrison officer sighs in relief and comments with a smile that the base got a very peculiar recruit. The huge battalion of the search operation advances, walking through the beautiful fields towards the dangerous forest. The group is led by the gruff Captain Basil and accompanied by the beautiful priestess Claire from the great temple. The hero assesses the extravagant search team, concluding that the religious woman's presence indicates a fear of forbidden magic. The experienced Captain Basil stares at the rookie very seriously and asks if his name is really Damian. The small warrior stops walking and holds his spear, calmly confirming the captain's great doubt. With a calm look, the newcomer asks without hesitation if there is any kind of problem with his presence there. The man warns that they belong to very different units, so the young man is just a stranger on the team. The hero agilely jumps over a dip and asks the captain not to be so rigid, as he will cooperate greatly. The gruff captain's eyes widen, totally shocked by the boy's audacity, and calls him crazy. The mysterious priestess calmly turns her head and asks the startled captain who that boy is. The man explains that he is a mere recruit from Neocalites, who raised the first suspicions about the energy. The beautiful priestess's golden eyes gleam with great interest in someone who already knows about the dark energy. The silent, religious woman walks calmly through the dense forest and approaches the small, lone recruit. The hero notices her approach and asks if the great priestess is feeling anything dangerous in the area. The mysterious woman says he was the first to suspect everything and politely asks to talk. The beautiful religious woman looks at him with great curiosity, questioning how he knew about the demonic energy in the beast. The intelligent warrior observes the woman's gaze and quickly deduces that she is doubting him. The boy again uses the lie about his late father, and the priestess asks to hear more details. The woman wants to know if he saw the great carcass, and the recruit confirms he saw it with the high priest. The young man explains with great firmness that he knows the region well, but that strange creature was very different. He reports seeing the giant bear with black spots and completely irrational, suspecting the malignant poison. The suspicious religious woman questions if he also learned that from his father, and the boy just confirms that he did. The priestess calmly thanks him for the great answer, while the cadet agrees with a simple nod. The gruff Captain Basil interrupts their conversation, warning that the team needs to keep moving. The commander shouts, ordering everyone to advance deeper and report anything suspicious in the forest. The huge garrison battalion obeys and begins to clear its hard path through the dense undergrowth of the place. The skilled protagonist scratches his head, looking very bored from just walking behind the soldiers. The boy goes down a small embankment, deciding to leave the great search mission entirely to the garrison. Hiding in a large bush, the recruit wonders if he will need to go deeper to find what he is looking for. Suddenly, two strong warriors from the search team spot the small soldier crouching in a clearing. The men run excitedly towards the hero, shouting and asking if he found the monster. The prodigy ignores the guards, admiring the rare white herbs and celebrating the great recovery of his mana. The panting warriors shout, extremely enraged, asking if the useless recruit came here to play around. The young protagonist turns his head, casting a sharp and threatening look at the two irritated warriors. With great coldness, the boy warns that they will end up perishing early if they keep talking such nonsense. Holding his spear, the hero says he only came to cooperate, and the search is the exclusive duty of the garrison. The guard gets angry, shouting that the young man scared everyone and telling him to stop disrupting the search. Demian calmly smiles, warning that the garrison's level is pathetic if they get scared by so little. The soldier's eyes widen, completely confused and shocked by the boy's absurd audacity. Captain Basil suddenly appears, telling the two to stop that fight immediately. The man looks at the recruit, warning that this impulsive behavior harms the entire operation. Demian closes his eyes and calmly agrees to move only within the search area. The boy waits with his spear while the commander walks away, letting out a long sigh. The captain orders all members to drop their equipment and start searching nearby. Suddenly, a sinister noise from the bushes startles all the garrison soldiers. Several monsters emerge in the darkness, and the warriors prepare for the violent battle. The soldiers smile confidently, thinking it's just a common band of orcs, easy to take down. One of the guards notices something very strange and shouts in terror for the others to wait. They notice the dark spots and realize the orcs are poisoned by malignant energy. One of the corrupted orcs charges at extreme speed, tearing up the ground of the dangerous forest. The soldier desperately shouts for his ally to dodge the terrible beast's violent attack. The guard panics as he sees the giant blade approaching too fast to escape. A huge crash echoes as the great monster's deadly blow is blocked just in time. The shocked soldier hears a firm voice, telling him to stay focused on the frightening battle. Demian blocks the attack with his spear and calls the guard a fool for lowering his guard. The captain shouts, ordering everyone into battle formation as the horde advances. The experienced commander tells his soldiers to block the orcs, acting in groups of 3. He quickly assigns 3 brave warriors just to protect the beautiful priestess. The captain observes the boy's posture, concluding that he has a lot of combat experience. The violent horde of orcs leaps with great fury against the soldiers' defensive formation. Demian turns his head, surprised to hear the desperate cries of his new allies. The guards are crushed by the axes, and the fragile priestess falls to the ground, very frightened. The corrupted monster displays a diabolical look, showing they were totally provoked. The beasts advance against the religious woman, as divine power is the natural enemy of that plague. A brave guard tries to block the giant orc's advance to save the fallen woman. The priestess closes her eyes, trembling with fear, as she clasps her hands in pure prayer. The warrior is surprised to see an intense divine light shining in the midst of that great chaos. The young woman releases her powerful sacred power, creating a large, bright aura around her. The orc retreats, roaring in pain as it is wounded by the light that burns its dangerous dark energy. The other guards continue to suffer in the violent exchange of blows against the monster's strength. Demian advances, knowing everyone will perish if he just follows the order not to participate. The skilled hero advances, tearing through the wind, and delivers a powerful blow charged with mana. The young man leaps high over the enemies, realizing he has no other choice there. With very fast and deadly strikes, the boy pierces 2 monsters with no difficulty. One of the guards is completely confused to see the beast falling right in front of him. Demian lands on the ground and orders the startled soldier to go help the others immediately. The warrior hesitates for a moment, stating he needs to continue protecting the religious woman. The agile recruit shouts with great firmness, guaranteeing he will take care of everything in that area himself. The relieved soldiers agree with the idea and run quickly to help the injured. Demian is left alone on the battlefield, taking on the mission of protecting the kneeling woman. The calm protagonist looks at the priestess, asking if she is okay after the big scare. The beautiful woman remains paralyzed with fear, with tears in her eyes and completely in shock. The boy holds her face, telling her to wake up to reality or everyone there will be taken down. He notices her lack of experience and concludes that her divine power was pure instinct. The young man points to the battle, ordering her to release her divine power to the limit now. The shaken priestess finally regains her consciousness and agrees with the hero's order. The shaken priestess finally musters her courage and stands up, full of great determination. The beautiful religious woman raises her great staff, calling to the divine to save her flock. A huge explosion of pure sacred energy is released around the brave and pure woman. Dimian's eyes widen in shock, realizing she is not just a common priestess. The strong light takes over the entire area, and the young man deduces she is at the high priestess level. The fierce monsters roar in pure agony as they are painfully burned by the light. One of the soldiers notices the miraculous opening and shouts, pointing out the great chance to attack. Taking advantage of the huge advantage, the brave soldiers advance furiously against the monsters. The experienced squad attacks relentlessly, annihilating the terrible beasts with ease. The severed head of an orc rolls on the ground, sealing the end of the dangerous and bloody combat. The exhausted survivors pant in relief, trying to confirm if the great nightmare is over. The tired captain wipes his face, ordering an immediate count of all the fallen men. The soldier reports 8 sad losses, and the leader says they will take all the bodies. The captain asks the priestess if they need to advance to track the malignant energy. The religious woman advances firmly, assuring him there is no need to continue. She analyzes the large fallen orc, confirming that the beasts were poisoned by the plague. The priestess looks at the dark woods, fearing that something worse is happening deep inside. She firmly warns that a large subjugation force will need to be formed to fight. Demian smiles, very excited to confirm that the garrison will prepare a joint attack. The brilliant prodigy reflects on the garrison steps, calmly sheathing his weapon. One of the strong soldiers approaches the hero awkwardly, looking embarrassed. The experienced warrior looks at the boy, offering his sincere thanks for the help. The downcast squad bows in deep respect, thanking him for the protection in combat. The hero scratches his head, quite embarrassed, asking them to forget that favor. The young protagonist sighs, completely relieved for not having drawn so much attention. The recruit bends down, tying his bag, and saying he worked hard to gather everything. His huge leather sack is completely full of valuable forest healing herbs. The calm boy walks towards Captain Basil, politely asking for his attention. The protagonist audaciously tells the leader to severely punish the abusive collectors. The experienced commander frowns, not understanding anything about that random request. The young man complains intensely about the absurd prices charged for basic herbs at the garrison. Without wasting any time, the rookie hands over the sack, telling him to heal the injured soldiers. The proud captain stares at the small boy, totally surprised, and just mutters, "Thank you." The great leader shouts, ordering everyone to retreat, demanding care in recovering the bodies. Demian moves away from the devastated squad, and the silent priestess watches him attentively. The beautiful woman gives a very enchanting smile, genuinely impressed by his kindness. Back at the military base, Demian reports to his own commander to share the outcome of the search mission. The bandage-headed leader receives him at his desk and calmly asks if anything important happened out there. The young man lies, saying everything was normal and that the priestess only confirmed the demonic energy in the monsters of the woods. The experienced commander listens closely to the boy's words and simply closes his eyes, nodding in silence. He places a small metal box on the desk, revealing that the garrison captain sent it to be delivered to him. The hero picks up the object, not understanding anything, and asks what it could be, but his leader says he has no idea either. The superior reveals that Basil promised to audit the collectors and guaranteed that the price of herbs in the region would drop by half. Demian flashes a smile of pure satisfaction upon realizing his complaint paid off and that he helped his comrades. The commander finally dismisses the young recruit, who gives a respectful salute before leaving the office. The leader looks thoughtful, resting his chin on his hand while watching the mysterious and skilled soldier leave. Back in the office, Captain Basil has a serious conversation with Commander Terran, stating that the new recruit is entirely out of the ordinary. Basil then reveals a big secret to his colleague, saying that the young rookie is already capable of perfectly manipulating the power of mana. Terran looks thoughtful, staring at the bag of herbs, and realizes the boy could have made a fortune if he had sold everything on the market. The commander recalls the moment when Demian gladly handed over the plants, asking for them to be used on the injured soldiers at the base. Terran lets out a sigh with a light puff of smoke and smiles, admitting to himself that this boy is definitely not an ordinary person. While walking down the hallway, Demian curiously looks at the small box he received and wonders if he got a valuable magical ring. Upon opening the packaging, the young man's eyes glow in shock as he faces an extremely rare mana-boosting elixir. The boy gives a clever smile and mentally thanks them for the valuable gift, deciding he will make great use of that potion. Suddenly, a strong and muscular soldier pops up right behind Demian, startling him by asking if something really good happened. The protagonist hastily hides the item inside his clothes, while grumbling about the unexpected scare his companion just gave him. The warrior laughs at the younger one's exaggerated reaction and asks what he just hid so suspiciously inside his coat. The young man lies while whistling, pretending he only got some medicine from the captain for his aches, leaving his colleague very surprised. The big guy regrets not joining the fight, but Demian calms him down, assuring that soon there will be plenty of battles for all of them. Shortly after, the young man pushes open the door to the garrison barracks, having no idea about the warm welcome waiting for him inside. The squad members crowd around the young man, very excited, celebrating the huge amount of herbs he brought back from the forest for them. They mess up his hair and pinch the protagonist's cheeks, praising the impressive intelligence of that amazing boy. Demian awkwardly explains that the herbs in the city were way too expensive, which is why he decided to gather some to help his base friends. At that moment, an officer walks in, clapping his hands, and asks for everyone's attention to share some important news he just received. The leader formally announces that a large subjugation force will be sent to search the dangerous forest later that month. He adds that until then, everyone will have free time to train except for morning drills, which causes a big celebration among the group. One of the comrades asks the recruit what he plans to do during his first few hours off, and the boy falls into thought. While everyone celebrates, a gray-haired guy named Donald walks by in silence and heads toward the exit alone. Another soldier asks where he is going, and Donald coldly replies that he is just going to train a bit more on his own. Before leaving, Donald casts a sharp and mysterious look at Demian, leaving the protagonist quite confused by that attitude. His colleagues laugh at the gray-haired guy's behavior, commenting that he has always been, and always will be, completely obsessed with training. Outside in the training yard, Donald angrily hurls his training sword onto the ground, showing great dissatisfaction with his progress. He rests on his knees, completely exhausted and frustrated for training nonstop without being able to see any real growth. The young man remembers his struggle in the latest battle and admits to himself that he clearly felt the weight of his physical limits. Distressed, he clutches his chest, thinking that if he stays weak like this, he will never become a true warrior. Suddenly, Donald spots Demian running agilely toward the yard exit and decides to watch him very closely. He recognizes the path and wonders if the mysterious rookie is heading to that same isolated spot in the woods again. Donald recalls that ever since the boy arrived, he always vanishes at the end of the day to secretly meditate amidst the wild nature. He also remembers the rumors about Demian's incredible feats and starts to suspect that the boy is hiding a very powerful secret. Determined to find out the truth and with nothing to lose, Donald grabs his steel sword and starts following the boy's footsteps. Meanwhile, deep in the woods, the protagonist sits comfortably on the grass, getting ready for his training ritual. Demian pulls the magical mana elixir out of the box and decides to start the process of absorbing that precious concentrated essence. Without hesitation, the young man flips the blue vial and consumes all the special liquid in a single gulp, feeling the energy enter his body. Surprised, he notices that the potion holds a much larger amount of condensed magical energy than he had calculated before. The hero closes his eyes, focusing his entire mind, knowing that golden chances like that do not come around easily in life. A massive purple aura appears around Dimian as he meditates deeply, focused on not wasting a single bit. Night quickly falls over the dark forest, while the protagonist stays motionless, carrying out his magical process. Finally, he opens his eyes tiredly, wiping the sweat from his forehead, and is startled to notice that the sun went down a long time ago. The boy realizes the absorption takes a while because his mana channel is small and plans to expand it as fast as possible. Just then, a cold voice pops up right behind him, startling the young man who did not expect to find anyone at that hour in the dark woods. Dianol appears before him and questions why the young man spends so many hours meditating alone in such an isolated place. Dimian gets tense and mentally blames himself for getting so focused that he failed to notice a rival approaching. He asks how his colleague found him, and Dianol confesses with a laugh that it would be impossible not to notice his mysterious nightly outings. The rival says he heard rumors about Dimian defeating several demonic orcs all by himself, which increases his suspicion. Dianol slowly and firmly steps closer, placing his sturdy hand directly onto the metal hilt of his sword. He draws the sharp blade and challenges the protagonist, asking the two of them to fight right. They're using the peak of their true strengths. Dimian tries to calm the rival down, reminding him that internal fights are forbidden, but quickly realizes Dianol is not joking. The gray-haired swordsman's fixed and determined gaze makes it clear that he is willing to go all the way to get this duel. Knowing his long-time rival's temper very well, the hero can read all of his intentions perfectly with just a glance. The protagonist breaks the silence by stating flatly that Dianol has finally hit an impassable limit in his skills. The gray-haired guy is visibly surprised and uncomfortable with the boy's direct statement, stuttering without understanding what he meant. Without hesitation, the boy repeats the question coldly, wanting to know exactly how long the rival has been feeling stuck. Dianol lowers his head in silence, showing that the protagonist's comment hit his biggest insecurity right on target. He confesses that he has been stuck for 3 months and feels like all his hard daily training is not bringing any growth. The protagonist shakes his head in understanding, stating that he knows all too well how terrible it is to carry that distressing feeling. He reflects that without proper professional guidance, the rival might end up ruining his own body during training. Dianol warns about the severe punishments if they get caught fighting, but Dimian says they just need to be discreet in the forest. The hero firmly grips his spear and warns in a serious tone that the guy could end up getting seriously hurt during the duel. Dianol draws his great steel sword with a defiant smile, guaranteeing that is exactly what he wants to test there. The two metal weapons fiercely collide in the air, throwing bright sparks and officially kicking off the secret showdown. Dimian gestures with his hand in a provocative way, calling the opponent into combat and telling him to charge full force.
The scene shifts from the intense moonlit duel back to the imposing gates of the military compound, where Commander Taran is walking alongside Captain Vassal. Vassal commends the bandaged commander for successfully wrapping up his important meeting. Taran nods wearily, acknowledging that the upcoming subjugation of the corrupted forest is shaping up to be an incredibly brutal and grueling campaign, though he remains confident that if the operation succeeds, it will ultimately bring massive benefits to their forces. Suddenly, the quiet of the night is shattered by the sharp, ringing sound of clashing steel echoing from the nearby woods. The two veteran officers immediately stop in their tracks, their eyes snapping toward the tree line as they zero in on the source of the commotion. Moving silently through the dark forest, they quickly track down the violent noise. Peering through the dense foliage, they are shocked to discover Damian and Dianol locked in a fierce, high-speed spar. Vassal immediately scowls, offended by the sheer nerve of the two soldiers blatantly breaking the strict rules against infighting, and moves to break it up. However, Taran swiftly raises a hand, ordering the captain to leave them be. Watching the intense duel unfold, Taran's expression softens into deep, quiet observation. He internally admits that he always knew Dianol had hit a severe, unbreakable wall in his training, but he never imagined the proud swordsman would become so utterly desperate and frustrated that he would practically beg a brand new rookie for help. Intrigued by the strange dynamic, Taran decides to allow the forbidden match to continue for a little while longer, so he can gauge their true abilities. Yet, as he closely studies their movements, the veteran commander can't help but notice a glaring, undeniable reality. The gap in raw combat skill between the struggling swordsman and the young spearman is almost impossibly vast. The dark forest rings with the sound of clashing steel as Dianel fiercely presses his attack. He wildly swings his massive greatsword downward, but Damien effortlessly leaps backward to evade the heavy blow. As the older swordsman launches into a relentless flurry of horizontal slashes, Damien seamlessly dodges every single strike. Utterly baffled, Dianel curses internally, agonizing over how it is even possible that the rookie remains completely untouched. A deep sense of disbelief washes over the veteran soldier as he realizes not a single one of his attacks has landed, feeling as though Damien is perfectly reading every single one of his moves. Standing calmly just out of reach, Damien observes the older man's transparent expressions, noting that Dianel's sheer frustration is written all over his face as he struggles to understand why his offensive isn't working. The narrative then breaks down the veteran's fighting style, highlighting that Dianel's greatsword possesses exceptional, devastating destructive power in a single strike. However, because the weapon is so incredibly heavy, the path of his swings is inevitably simple and completely predictable. Despite this glaring tactical flaw, Damien quietly acknowledges the older man's undeniable talent, genuinely impressed that Dianel has the skill to wield a sword that acts more like a heavy shackle with such proficiency. Damien continues to analyze Dianel's flawed fighting style, noting that while the Neocalit's unit mainly fights hulking monsters, insisting on using such a massive, unwieldy sword will inevitably ruin the older soldier's body balance. Realizing that mere words will never persuade the stubborn swordsman to change his approach, the young spearman grips his weapon tightly, resolving to forcefully make Dianel understand the harsh reality through absolute, overwhelming defeat. He prepares to utilize the massive reserve of mana he had violently forced into his core earlier with the potent elixir. Suddenly, Dianel feels a chilling, palpable shift in the air as Damien's entire demeanor changes, the atmosphere growing heavy with crackling purple energy. Despite sensing the overwhelming surge of power radiating from the young recruit, the desperate swordsman grits his teeth, stubbornly convincing himself that he still holds the absolute upper hand in terms of raw offensive strength. Shouting that there is no reason to avoid a head-on clash, Dianel recklessly lunges forward, bringing his massive greatsword crashing down with everything he has, aiming to crush the young spearman in a single devastating blow. Dianel brings his massive greatsword crashing down with terrifying force, but Damien remains completely still until the absolute last possible second. With terrifying precision, the young spearman thrusts his weapon upward, directly meeting the heavy blade head-on. A deafening crack echoes through the dark woods as Damien channels his newly condensed mana into a devastating parry. The sheer, overwhelming impact violently shatters the top half of Dianel's expensive greatsword, sending a large chunk of steel spinning uselessly into the dirt. The older swordsman is thrown backward by the massive shockwave, dropping to one knee as he stares in absolute, horrified disbelief at his broken weapon. He cries out in utter shock, lamenting that he bought the incredibly expensive sword with his own hard-earned money. Damien stands over the defeated soldier, his eyes glowing with an intense, unyielding resolve. He coldly states that the price of the weapon is completely irrelevant right now. The young spearman addresses the older man firmly by his official rank, Private First Class Dianel, and sharply demands that he get back up and try coming at him again, exactly as he is now. Dianel is left completely stunned by the ridiculous demand. Gripping his shattered blade, his mind races with despair as he realizes that it was utterly impossible to land a single hit on the boy when his weapon was fully intact. Fighting him now with a broken, off-balance sword is pure suicide. Yet, panting heavily and trembling with exhaustion, the stubborn swordsman refuses to stay down. Declaring fiercely that the sparring session is not over yet, Dianel forces himself to his feet and desperately charges back into the fray, launching himself at the young spearman with a wild, reckless leap. With a desperate surge of energy, Diano recklessly lunges forward, violently swinging the shattered remains of his greatsword. Unfazed, Damien swiftly brings up his spear, catching and effortlessly parrying the frantic strike with absolute precision. As the jarring impact forces the older swordsman back, a sudden, shocking realization washes over him. Gripping the jagged hilt, Diano stares at the broken blade in sheer bewilderment, realizing that shedding the missing steel's absurd weight has instantly made his entire body feel drastically lighter and far more agile. He stands frozen, utterly stunned, that simply reducing the weapon's massive bulk could completely shatter the physical limits holding him back. Seeing the revelation dawn on the veteran's face, Damien softly chuckles and finally breaks down the harsh truth. He points out that the colossal greatsword was always a terrible fit for Diano's specific height and build, noting that such a heavy, unwieldy weapon was meant for a hulking giant like their squadmate. Kyle, he calmly explains that Diano has been unknowingly sabotaging his own immense potential by stubbornly forcing himself to wield the completely wrong weapon all this time. As the profound realization sinks into the older soldier's mind, Damien smoothly offers an unexpected olive branch. Acknowledging that he permanently ruined the expensive blade, the young spearman generously promises to buy Diano a brand new, properly balanced sword, as a formal apology. While Diano stands completely dumbfounded by the kind gesture, Damien flashes a quiet, calculating smile. Internally, the young warrior quickly reasons that securing the unwavering loyalty and favor of a highly talented veteran, for the mere price of a standard weapon, is an incredibly profitable trade, especially since his pockets are already overflowing with cash. Seamlessly closing out the intense nighttime encounter, Damien casually suggests they head into town together during their free time, the next day to pick out the perfect blade, leaving the dark forest behind them in peaceful silence. The scene transitions to the bright, sunlit exterior of a bustling town building. Inside the rustic weapon shop, Diano browses the heavy armaments until Damien suddenly grabs his attention, proudly presenting the veteran with a pair of sleek, sharply curved blades. He explains to the utterly confused swordsman that they are scimitars, lightweight weapons heavily favored by swift warriors in brutal desert regions. Having thoroughly analyzed Diano's movements during their intense midnight spar, the young spearman confidently insists that these specific blades are the absolute perfect fit to replace his shattered greatsword. Diano immediately protests the radical change, nervously arguing that making the switch is entirely impossible since he has absolutely zero experience wielding dual swords. Damien smoothly counters the veteran's doubts with a bright, confident smirk, revealing that he actually possesses a highly specialized sword technique that perfectly synergizes with scimitars. Acknowledging the older soldier's raw talent, Damien assures Diano that he will pick up the new combat style incredibly fast, boldly promising that mastering the dual blades will make him several times stronger than he ever was, while dragging around a heavy chunk of iron. Seeing the older swordsman still hesitating at the prospect of completely overhauling his fighting style, Damien playfully forces his hand. The young spearman lays down a strict ultimatum, flatly declaring that he will absolutely not pay for the replacement weapon unless Diano agrees to choose those exact scimitars. Flustered and completely backed into a corner by the boy's financial leverage, Diano loudly complains that the tactic is completely unfair. As the veteran reluctantly caves to the demand, Damien smiles softly to himself. He acknowledges internally that purchasing the high-quality twin blades will cost him a massive chunk of his funds, but he deems it an entirely priceless investment. His mind drifts to a solemn, quiet memory from his past life, visualizing himself standing alone in a dark, desolate graveyard, revealing that out of everyone he had ever fought alongside in that hellish war, Diano was the one true comrade he could unconditionally entrust his very life to. The scene rips into a dark memory. Damien stands silently before a lonely tombstone, remembering how his fierce comrade, Diano, died protecting him. The bitter vision instantly snaps back to the present reality at a local forge. A burly blacksmith hands Damien a heavy, wrapped bundle of newly purchased blades. Damien passes the weapons to the older swordsman with a soft smile, silently vowing that there is absolutely nothing he wouldn't do for his loyal friend. Watching Dianel stand awkwardly with the heavy swords, Damien's resolve hardens. To rewrite their tragic future, his very first step is to completely reforge the older soldier. He internally promises to push Dianel through a grueling, brutal training path to forcefully make him grow. Clutching the wrapped swords, Dianel is utterly confused by Damien's intense, lingering stare, questions why he suddenly feels a strange, impending chill run down his spine. Meanwhile, inside the grand, sunlit halls of the holy temple, Priestess Claire humbly approaches the high priest. The elder clergyman greets her warmly and asks what brings her here. She directly questions if the rumors are true that their specialized monk unit is officially joining the brutal subjugation force. The high priest confirms the news, adding that 20 trained priests will also be deployed. Claire's eyes widen slightly in shock. She notes internally that it is absolutely unprecedented for the temple to commit such a massive amount of holy personnel to a single operation. Steeling her resolve, she boldly requests to join the subjugation force herself. The high priest is completely taken aback, reminding the young woman that she suffered through a horrific, traumatizing ordeal during the last bloody search mission, silently questioning why she would willingly throw herself back into hell. Undaunted by the high priest's concern, Priestess Claire stands firm in the sunlit temple hall, formally reiterating her deep desire to participate in the upcoming operation. She emphasizes that the military forces are heading directly into the corrupted Bronzerian forest, the very same place she barely survived just a few days prior. Seeing her unwavering determination, the elder clergyman sighs and yields, granting her request. Claire then asks another crucial question, inquiring if the Neocalites unit will also be joining the subjugation force. The high priest confirms that they are, logically pointing out that they are the local unit who knows the dense, treacherous terrain of the Bronzerian forest better than anyone else. Hearing this, Claire's eyes widen as a powerful realization strikes her. She pieces together that the quiet, incredibly strong young spearman who saved her life will undoubtedly be deployed on this massive mission as well. The scene suddenly shifts, plunging into a chaotic, terrifying flashback from the dark forest. In the heat of their desperate battle against the corrupted orcs, Claire remembers being completely frozen in fear, overwhelmed by the demonic energy. Suddenly, Damien grabbed her by the face, shaking her violently to break her paralysis. His face was a mask of fierce, unyielding intensity as he shouted at her to snap out of it. Staring directly into her panicked eyes, he commanded her to release her divine healing power over the wounded to its absolute maximum limit. Right at that very second, as the intense, gripping memory of the fierce young warrior fades, the scene returns to the peaceful temple. Claire gently clutches the holy symbol resting on her chest, a faint, deeply grateful blush rising to her cheeks as she softly whispers Damien's name to herself in the quiet hall. The scene shifts to a vast open field right on the border of the Bronzerian forest. A massive army is gathered, arranged in rigid, perfect formations under the bright morning sun. Captain Vassal, commanding the local garrison troops, steps forward to formally welcome the newly arrived commander. An arrogant-looking nobleman, clad in gleaming, pristine silver armor, aggressively demands to know who is in charge. Introducing himself grandly as Baron Wilkes Diello, the supreme commander of the entire subjugation force, he sneers down at Vassal. The Baron cruelly notes that since Vassal lacks a proper noble last name, he must be a lowly commoner. Baron Diello loudly complains about being sent to such a god-forsaken place, arrogantly declaring that he fully intends to finish the subjugation as quickly as possible so he can return home. Standing within the ranks of the Neocalites unit, Dianel grits his teeth and quietly mutters to Damien, calling the Baron a stuck-up bastard and asking if all nobles are that incredibly authoritarian. Damien calmly replies that not all of them are, prompting a curious glance from Dianel, who notes the rookie speaks as if he has met a lot of nobles. Damien smoothly deflects, vaguely claiming he just heard stories from his father. Watching the arrogant Baron strut back toward the front of the army, Damien sighs internally, deeply hoping the man's massive ego won't cause catastrophic problems during the impending battle. Standing before the massive, assembled army, Baron Diello bellows his final address. He declares that their subjugation force has received direct, absolute orders from the king himself. They must march into the Bronzerian forest and entirely uproot the foul source of the demonic energy corrupting the land. Drawing his sword and pointing it toward the dark, looming tree line, the Baron roars the command for all troops to advance. The massive army erupts into a deafening war cry. Amidst the roaring soldiers, Damien nudges the hulking giant Kyle, playfully warning him to shout even louder so the stuck-up commander doesn't put him on his bad side later. The ground heavily shakes under the synchronized, thundering footsteps of the massive subjugation force as they finally begin their grim march into the corrupted forest. As the massive subjugation force marches deeper into the dense, dark woods, Diana looks around at the endless sea of armored soldiers. But Damien notes that while they have an incredibly massive number of people, simply having a sheer numerical advantage won't make this operation easy. Damien points out that the corrupted Bronzerian forest is vastly larger and far more treacherous than most people realize. Overhearing their conversation, the Urkel garrison captain, Basil, steps in and solemnly agrees with the assessment. Basil admits his own growing unease, confessing that despite the massive army gathered around them, he still holds a sinking feeling that their raw numbers might ultimately fall short against the horrors waiting within the woods. Damien remains silent, his expression deadly serious as he stares ahead, fully aware of the brutal reality of their situation. Further up the marching column, the dense trees begin to squeeze the soldiers tightly together. Frustrated shouts ring out as the heavily armored men struggle to navigate the narrowing path, repeatedly bumping into one another and cursing the claustrophobic terrain. Seeing the chaotic bottleneck, Barondiello immediately barks out a sharp command to change their marching formation into a single column, ordering the personnel on the left flank to move forward first, to thin the dense crowd. Watching the swift restructuring from the middle ranks, Damien quietly notes that the arrogant Baron's situational judgment and tactical response time are actually surprisingly faster than he initially expected. However, the young spearman also recognizes a glaring critical flaw in the new strategy. By extending the marching line into a long, thin column through the dense woods, the entire army has suddenly become dangerously exposed, requiring them to be incredibly careful. Realizing the exact same tactical vulnerability, Captain Basil quickly jogs up to the front of the line to advise the Baron. After being haughtily corrected to address the arrogant nobleman strictly as Commander Wilkes, Basil respectfully suggests that they need to strategically place their heavily armored shieldmen directly in the middle of the newly formed column. He warns that their current, extended formation will be extremely vulnerable if the corrupted monsters decide to launch a surprise attack from the dense, dark flanks of the forest. Baron Diello considers the captain's advice for a brief moment before casually agreeing, coldly ordering Basil's own Urkel garrison to be placed squarely in the middle to act as the defensive buffer. Swallowing his pride, Basil accepts the dangerous assignment and then cautiously follows up with another crucial tactical suggestion, nervously proposing they send out a small, specialized scouting party of fast runners to survey the path ahead and prevent any deadly ambushes. However, the Baron instantly dismisses the incredibly vital idea with an arrogant scoff, blindly declaring that there is absolutely no need for such cautious measures. Dismissing the valid concerns of Captain Basil, the arrogant Baron confidently boasts that if any mere monsters dare to attack their massive formation, his army can easily just wipe them all out. Overhearing the naive, dangerous statement from the middle ranks, Basil is left utterly speechless, realizing the commander severely underestimates the horrors of the corrupted forest. Before the captain can argue further, Baron Diello cuts him off with a harsh, cold glare. The nobleman firmly warns Basil that he will consider any further advice to be a direct overstep of authority and explicitly orders him to stop talking. Understanding that pushing the issue will only end badly for him, the defeated captain quietly mutters his acknowledgement and turns back to his men. The scene then suddenly fast-forwards, throwing the reader directly into a chaotic, bloody skirmish deeper inside the dark woods. The terrifying shriek of a massive, corrupted orc echoes through the trees as a heavily armored soldier violently slashes its thick hide. Dozens of similar brutal fights erupt around them as the elite army clashes head-on, with the grotesque monsters hiding in the dense foliage. Despite the intense chaos, the disciplined soldiers efficiently cut down the monstrous beasts. Walking through the aftermath of the carnage, Baron Diallo smugly observes his men systematically slaughter the creatures. The arrogant commander notes that, exactly as he expected, the mindless monsters of the outer forest are absolutely nothing against a well-trained elite army. Overly confident in their overwhelming success, the Baron casually wonders aloud why previous military forces couldn't easily subjugate this cursed place earlier. Suddenly, Kyle, the hulking giant from the Neocolits unit, pauses mid-stride, an unsettled look crossing his face. He turns to Damien, his voice tinged with unease, and complains that he smells something incredibly disgusting lingering in the thick air, sniffing the humid breeze. Kyle grimaces and points out that the foul stench smells exactly like heavily rotting meat. Damien's eyes instantly snap wide open in sheer alarm. He sharply demands to know exactly where the giant smells the odor coming from. Visibly startled by the young spearman's sudden, intense panic, Kyle frantically points toward a dark, dense patch of the forest nearby. Racing over to the spot, Damien drops to one knee and immediately spots a series of deep, strange indentations pressed into the muddy ground. Staring at the bizarre circular tracks, a cold, terrifying dread washes over the young warrior as he instantly recognizes exactly what kind of horrifying monster left them behind. Without a second to lose, Damien violently screams out a warning, commanding the entire army to frantically watch the ground beneath their feet. Before the confused soldiers can react, the muddy earth violently erupts beneath them. Horrifying creatures burst from the soil, viciously ambushing the shrieking men from below. The beasts are revealed to be morks, grotesque monsters characterized by short, bristly fur, long pig-like snouts, and bizarre, slithering snake-like tongues. Seeing the swarm, Damien notes internally that the ambush was their doing all along. Total chaos consumes the tightly packed ranks, as panicked soldiers desperately warn each other to guard their flanks, cursing aloud at the sheer impossible number of beasts pouring out of the earth. Dodging a vicious claw, Damien's mind races in deep confusion. He knows that morks are fundamentally solitary and generally quite peaceful creatures, leaving him deeply alarmed as to why they are suddenly attacking in such a massive, highly coordinated swarm. Sprinting through the bloody chaos, Damien locks eyes with Kyle and sharply orders the hulking giant to immediately prioritize helping the senior soldiers right next to him. Kyle firmly shouts his understanding and leaps into the fray. As the frenzied morks unleash piercing, deafening shrieks and violently charge, Damien swiftly thrusts his spear, fiercely cutting down the beasts while holding the line with his comrades. Seeing the terror threatening to break the army's formation, Damien raises his voice over the din of battle. He loudly urges everyone to catch their breath and steady themselves, reassuring the panicked troops that the morks are actually not difficult to handle as long as they face the creatures directly head-on. Encouraged by the young spearman's confident tactical advice, the elite soldiers quickly rally their courage, stepping forward to efficiently slice down the leaping beasts. However, despite the troops regaining their footing, Damien grimly surveys the endless sea of corrupted monsters and realizes that merely holding the line simply won't do. He notes internally that there are far too many creatures entirely poisoned and driven mad by the dense demonic energy, concluding that they urgently need a specific countermeasure to survive the overwhelming numbers. The young warrior suddenly breaks away from the main defensive formation, sprinting at full speed deep into the dark, treacherous forest, entirely alone. Breaking away from the main battle, Damien sprints desperately through the dark forest, scanning the tree line until he spots exactly what he is looking for. In a small, tense clearing, two young priestesses stand back to back, gripping their holy staffs as they are slowly backed into a corner by the encroaching morks. Damien loudly calls out to them, recognizing Priestess Claire among the pair. He sharply orders them to quickly follow him to a safer position. Leading the two healers back toward the chaotic vanguard, Damien immediately barks out a tactical command to Claire. He tells the young priestess to perfectly replicate her actions from their last desperate encounter, specifically asking her to forcefully release her massive reserve of divine healing power over the wounded soldiers fighting on the front lines. Despite the sheer terror gripping her, Claire nods firmly, raising her holy staff high into the air and loudly declaring that she will try her absolute best. A blinding, explosive wave of pure white light violently erupts from Claire's staff, forcefully washing over the entire battlefield. The holy energy instantly sears the corrupted demonic aura, thick in the air. The agonizing light violently burns the Morks, causing the grotesque creatures to shriek in sheer agony as their dark, corrupted flesh begins to literally melt away. Seeing the entire monstrous swarm completely paralyzed by the blinding holy magic, Captain Basil realizes the tides have instantly turned. He violently raises his sword, loudly rallying his troops and roaring that now is the perfect time to strike. Energized by the captain's command, the soldiers surge forward, ruthlessly slaughtering the defenseless, screaming Morks. As the chaotic skirmish finally ends, the exhausted soldiers stand panting amidst a massive sea of dead, black-blooded monsters. Commander Terran carefully steps over the rotting corpses, driving his sword through any twitching beast. He calmly orders his men to immediately check for casualties, treat the wounded, and make absolutely certain that every single monster is fully dead. Suddenly, Terran stops, his eyes narrowing as he notices a silent, towering figure slowly approaching from behind him. Without warning, the tense silence of the aftermath is shattered by a vicious, resounding smack. Baron Diello steps forward and violently strikes Commander Taran across the face. The sheer force of the sudden, unprovoked blow leaves Terran wide-eyed and stunned, his head whipping to the side from the impact. Nearby soldiers recoil in sheer disbelief, stammering out their shock as they helplessly watch their leader be humiliated. Glaring down with utter contempt, the arrogant Baron coldly seeks confirmation that Terran is the leader of the Neocolits unit. Baron Diello's face twisted into a furious snarl as he launched a rapid, vicious interrogation. He tore into Terran's competence, mercilessly questioning his leadership and management. Shoving all the blame for the bloodbath directly onto the local garrison, the arrogant nobleman stood over the speechless warrior, ruthlessly demanding to know exactly how many monsters they had blindly neglected in the cursed woods. Unfazed by Baron Diello's violent assault amidst the rotting corpses, Commander Taran calmly defends his unit. He asserts that Morks are naturally solitary, making their coordinated swarm completely unpredictable and a clear result of the thick demonic energy. The enraged Baron rejects the reasoning, furiously demanding why the Neocolits unit had not scouted ahead and questioning if ignorance justifies their massive casualties. His patience exhausted, Taran coldly turns the blame back on the nobleman. He reminds the Baron that Captain Basil had strongly advised sending scouts earlier, only for Diello himself to arrogantly dismiss the warning with blind boasts of easily wiping out any threats. Infuriated by the undeniable truth, Diello draws back his fist in pure rage, screaming to ask if the veteran has a death wish. Before the fight can escalate, the High Priest intervenes, immediately commanding an end to the arguing. Approaching with Priestess Claire, the clergyman reveals the grim reality of their situation. He explains that the Bronzerian forest is so heavily poisoned by demonic energy that it has developed a malicious consciousness of its own. When a panicked Diello demands to know the implications for their army, the High Priest issues a chilling warning. She explains that the living forest now recognizes the subjugation force as a direct enemy, cautioning that as they march deeper into the actively hostile environment, they are bound to face horrifying events that completely defy all logic and common sense. The tense standoff is suddenly interrupted as Priestess Claire attempts to step forward and speak up for the beleaguered soldiers. However, the furious Baron instantly shuts her down, harshly warning the holy woman that military matters do not concern her. He threatens to file a formal complaint with the temple authorities the moment the subjugation ends, if she dares to cross the line again. Turning his venom back to the Neocolits unit, the commander promises severe disciplinary action after the mission, coldly warning the veterans to perform their roles flawlessly if they wish to keep their lives. Without missing a beat, he orders the exhausted troops to quickly recover the fallen bodies and prepare to move locations to establish a secure camp. Later, the battered army manages to set up a fortified circular encampment within a temporary safe zone in the woods. Resting inside his tent, Damien stretches his aching limbs and silently expresses his relief at finding a relatively secure place to rest. However, he notes how incredibly heavy his body feels, attributing the intense physical drain to the thick demonic energy permeating the entire forest. Analyzing the oppressive atmosphere, the young spearman deduces that the corruption's core source must be located dead in the center of the woods. He realizes with mounting dread that the deeper they push inward, the worse the soldiers' physical conditions will deteriorate, making a prolonged, drawn-out campaign incredibly dangerous. Knowing that choosing the right tactical direction is now an absolute matter of life and death, the scene shifts to the dimly lit central command tent. Gathered around a large map with the other officers, Baron Diallo traces a long, sweeping route with his finger. He dictates their upcoming strategy, instructing the military leadership that the army will take a cautious approach by slowly circling inward from the outer outskirts of the forest, rather than pushing straight toward the center. In the dimly lit command tent, Captain Basil cautiously speaks up, acknowledging that the Baron's cautious method is sound, but strongly suggesting they should head straight for the center immediately. Commander Taran quickly agrees, pointing out that as time drags on, more monsters will become corrupted, making the situation far more disadvantageous. The Baron arrogantly dismisses their concerns, demanding to know if they will take full responsibility if the source of the demonic energy isn't actually in the center. He sneers, asking if the seasoned veterans are confident enough to put their own necks on the line. As the two local commanders fall silent under the threat, the Baron coldly orders them to stop interfering. He arrogantly claims that people who don't know anything always try to dictate strategy without understanding the heavy burden of command. Priestess Claire steps forward, respectfully stating that it is highly likely the source is in the center, judging by how thick the demonic energy becomes the further in they go. Priestess Claire quickly backs her statement, grimly reporting they have already suffered over 100 casualties on the first day alone. Basil pleads with the commander to reconsider the priestess's words, warning that delaying will only dwindle their troops, while the enemy's numbers multiply. Basil adds that, quickly removing the core source first and then dealing with the remaining monsters on the outskirts is the most logical plan. The Barons scoff at the idea, calling it an inefficient method. Basil fires back, firmly stating that a direct strike is the safest and most reliable method, arguing they cannot let the soldiers be needlessly sacrificed in a slow, grueling forced march. Enraged by the perceived insubordination, the Baron slams his hands on the table, screaming that a death for the kingdom is a noble sacrifice, and accusing Basil of claiming he is mistreating his soldiers. Suddenly, Hemmerin, the temple commander, calmly interrupts the escalating argument. With a smooth, disarming smile, he addresses the Baron, casually asking if the ultimate goal of the subjugation force isn't to simply eliminate the source of the demonic energy. Hemmerin gently strokes the Baron's massive ego, purring that if they head straight to the center and succeed, the Baron will be widely respected as a brilliant, triumphant commander. He smoothly reasons that while anyone could succeed, given enough time, finishing the job quickly would be entirely credited to the Baron's exceptional leadership abilities. Caught off guard by the sudden heavy flattery, the Baron's rage instantly evaporates. Swayed by the temple commander's flattery, Baron Diallo smugly strokes his chin and agrees to the change in plans. He declares that since everyone is in agreement, they will advance directly to the center of the forest to destroy the source of the demonic energy first, while Captain Basil and Commander Taran look on with serious, unconvinced expressions. The Baron dramatically throws his arm forward, loudly ordering the troops to form up and begin their straight advance into the heart of the forest. The scene briefly shifts to show the massive ranks of armored soldiers standing silently at attention in the dim light of the camp. Outside the command tent, Commander Taran addresses his men, informing them of the leadership's sudden decision to head straight to the center where the source of the corruption is located. Damien suddenly steps forward, interrupting to ask about their specific formation and where their unit will be positioned. A senior soldier immediately scolds the young spearman, harshly telling the rookie that this is not a conversation for him to butt into. However, Taran raises a hand to wave off the senior soldier's anger, stating that it is fine. The veteran commander then reveals to the group that their unit has been assigned to lead in the vanguard. Hearing this tactical placement, Damien quickly reasons that if they are leading the vanguard, they should be operating a scouting party, noting that the garrison forces will be marching right behind them anyway. Terran quietly considers the point and agrees that setting up a scout unit would be a beneficial move. Without a moment's hesitation, Damien raises his hand and boldly volunteers to take on the scouting mission. The senior soldier explodes in anger once again, yelling at Damien to just follow orders and furiously asking how a mere rookie dares to make such reckless demands. Remaining completely calm under the senior soldier's shouting, Damien defends his request by listing his specific capabilities. He points out that he is one of the fastest members in the unit, possesses excellent vision, is highly skilled at navigating the dense forest, and has all the necessary abilities required of a scout. Terran stares at the boy in thoughtful silence, his mind flashing back to a private conversation with Captain Basil. He remembers Basil warning him that Damien is completely unordinary and revealing the shocking fact that the boy can actively use mana. Convinced by the memory of Basil's assessment, Terran finally breaks the silence and officially grants Damien permission to scout. The senior soldier cries out to his captain in shocked protest, but Terran firmly stands his ground, raising a finger as he prepares to add a specific condition to his approval. Commander Terran firmly asserts that while Damien will be part of the scouting party, he absolutely will not be the one in command. Pointing to the side, Terran declares that the commander of the scouting party will instead be Vex. A serious-looking soldier steps out from the crowd and sharply confirms his orders. Terran introduces Vex to Damien, instructing the soldier to take the kid and immediately form a scouting party to head out. Vex stares at Damien in complete disbelief. He stammers, pointing out to his commander that the boy is just a rookie who still lacks any real combat experience. Unfazed by the protest, Terran calmly replies that this is exactly why he is assigning an experienced soldier like Vex to be the actual commander of the mission. Turning back to the young spearman, Terran instructs Damien that since they will be heading out immediately, he needs to leave his long spear behind and equip a much shorter, more practical broadsword for the dense forest terrain. Damien, respectfully, nods his understanding. The scene shifts, showing the small, tense scouting party cautiously navigating the thick overgrown brush ahead of the main army. Walking closely behind Vex, Damien tightens his grip on his newly equipped broadsword. He notes internally that the oppressive, suffocating aura of demonic energy is definitely much thicker now that they have pushed further inside the woods. As he scans the dark shadows between the massive trees, Damien reminds himself that the most critically important part of this entire subjugation mission is finding the main abomination that is actively generating the thick demonic corruption. He acknowledges the extreme risks involved in taking the vanguard position, but realizes that it is the only way to quickly track and sense the abomination's dark aura. Suddenly, Vex stops dead in his tracks, his hand flying up to signal a halt. A soldier behind him quietly asks what is wrong and why he suddenly stopped. Damien's eyes dart nervously around the dense foliage as he whispers that he can clearly sense some kind of unseen presence hiding over there. Intrigued and slightly alarmed, Vex repeats the word, scanning the thick brush. Vex remains silent for a tense moment before drawing his sword and commanding the group to carefully check it out. The small team of scouts slowly advances toward the specific patch of dark brush Vex pointed out. As Vex pushes the heavy leaves aside to reveal what is hiding inside, his eyes snap wide open in pure, paralyzing terror, his face draining of all color as a silent gasp escapes his lips. Vex cautiously pushes aside the thick brush, fully expecting to quietly scold the rookie for jumping at shadows. Instead, he sharply gasps, his eyes widening in pure shock and horror at the sight before him. In a large, unnaturally dark clearing just ahead, a massive, terrifying horde of corrupted monsters is gathered. The horde is composed of several completely different species of beasts, all densely packed together and radiating a thick, suffocating aura of dark demonic energy. Crouching low in the brush, one of the scouting soldiers stammers in disbelief, asking Vex if a gathering like this is even naturally possible. Another teammate nervously follows up, desperately trying to understand why several entirely different, usually hostile types of monsters, are suddenly grouping up together in such a massive horde. Staring at the terrifying sight, Vex quietly admits that he has never seen anything like this unnatural gathering either. He then looks over his shoulder at Damien in absolute awe, quietly wondering to himself how the young rookie was possibly able to sense the presence of something like this from so far away. Still watching the horde, Vex notes to himself that all of these completely different beasts are heavily poisoned and deeply corrupted by the demonic energy. As he observes the massive horde beginning to slowly shuffle forward in a unified direction, a chilling realization strikes the scout leader. Vex's eyes narrow as he wonders where this unnatural army is moving to. Following their path, Vex realizes with sudden, cold dread exactly what they are doing. He curses aloud, urgently informing his men that the massive horde of corrupted monsters is heading in the exact direction of their main subjugation force. Snapping into action, Vex turns to 3 of his soldiers and urgently orders them to immediately return to the main unit to report this massive, impending threat. After the soldiers swiftly depart, Vex calls out to Damien. He commands the young recruit to stay sharp and to immediately tell him if he senses any other suspicious presences lurking in the dark woods. Damien firmly acknowledges the order. Vex then turns back to carefully observe the slow-moving horde. He quietly explains to the remaining scouts that from this point forward, their primary objective is to accurately determine the massive enemy's exact numbers. He commands the small team that in order to do that, they are going to have to carefully move in right behind the terrifying horde. Damien quietly confirms his understanding of the highly dangerous plan. The scouting party creeps silently through the oppressive shadows of the Bronzerian forest. Suddenly, a suffocating, heavy wave of demonic energy washes over them. Damien stops dead in his tracks, cold sweat breaking out across his face. Overwhelmed by the sheer weight of the dark aura, he wonders in alarm what exactly is causing it, noting internally that the pressure is simply too intense. Peering cautiously through the dense, twisted trees, Damien's eyes widen at the sight of a massive, glowing horde of beasts gathered in the distance. Staring at the terrifying scale of the gathering, he realizes with a sinking feeling that there is no way these are all the monsters lurking in the forest. Frustration immediately sets in. Gripping his weapon as a faint purple aura pulses around his body, Damien curses his current limitations. He thinks to himself that if only his mana had already reached the 3-star level, he would have been able to figure out the exact nature of this terrifying, overwhelming pressure. Right beside him, Vex pushes aside the thick brush to get a clearer view and instantly freezes. The seasoned scout mutters in utter disbelief, his face completely draining of color as he stares at the hellish landscape before them. Recognizing the horrifying reality of the gathering, Vex grimly declares to the group that this is an organized monster wave. Scanning the colossal, heavily muscled beasts radiating sinister red energy, Damien quickly assesses the severe tactical threat. The young warrior warns the team that these creatures are of a much higher tier than the monsters the army fought earlier. Vex explains to Damien and the others that the enemy was planning to deliberately wear their subjugation force down with the first group of weaker monsters, only to wipe them out completely with this devastating high-tier wave. Knowing the survival of the entire army hangs in the balance, Vex immediately makes the call. He turns away from the horde and orders the scouts to head back right now, firmly stating that retreating and reporting this critical intelligence to the main unit takes absolute priority over everything else. Suddenly, Damien's expression shifts to one of profound confusion as a strange bright light flashes in the distance. He stops in his tracks, internally questioning what exactly he is sensing. Right beside him, Vex abruptly drops to his knees, visibly struggling under the intense pressure of the environment, while another scout nervously looks on. Seeing Damien suddenly sprint away from their concealed position, Vex frantically yells out the young recruit's name. Gripping his broadsword tightly, Damien dashes forward through the dense brush, without hesitation. Vex furiously calls out to the boy, angrily branding him a crazy fool, and demanding to know where he is running off to so suddenly. Without breaking his stride, Damien simply looks back over his shoulder and points a finger forward, urgently directing Vex's attention toward the source of the anomaly. Vex looks toward where Damien is pointing, asking aloud what in the world he is supposed to be seeing. Just ahead, Damien boldly leaps over a jagged stone ridge, revealing a massive, terrifyingly dense concentration of glowing purple demonic energy violently swirling in the deep trench right below them. The scene abruptly shifts back to the main subjugation force, where a brutal, chaotic battle has fully erupted. The deafening shrieks of corrupted monsters fill the air as the human soldiers violently clash with the massive, high-tier beasts pouring out of the woods. Standing in the thick of the bloody skirmish, Commander Taran relentlessly cuts down the creatures, while internally questioning where such an impossibly overwhelming number of monsters could have possibly come from. He grimly acknowledges to himself that while the army was thankfully able to prepare a defensive line due to the scouting party's timely intelligence report, the sheer volume of the enemy horde is still staggering. Amidst the frantic fighting, a nearby soldier calls out to Taran, nervously asking the captain if he thinks the distant scouting party is safe. Slicing through another beast, Taran confidently reassures his subordinate, stating that since the highly experienced Vex went with them, the scouts will be absolutely fine. Just behind the vanguard, the holy priestesses firmly clasp their hands together and channel their divine power, unleashing another blinding wave of purifying light across the battlefield. Seeing the monsters paralyzed and visibly burning from the holy magic, the human soldiers instantly rally. They yell out to one another to seize the tactical opening, urging their comrades to strike quickly while the beasts are severely weakened. The soldiers ruthlessly plunge their spears and swords into the incapacitated monsters, furiously cursing the creatures to die. As the immediate wave of enemies falls, Commander Taran lowers his sword, taking a brief, exhausting moment to catch his heavy breath. However, his momentary relief is violently interrupted when a terrified soldier screams out a frantic warning, desperately urging the captain to watch his back. Taran barely turns his bandaged head in shock as a towering, blood-soaked monster with a glowing red eye looms directly behind him, silently raising a massive crude axe high into the air for a fatal strike. The massive monster swings its axe down with brutal force. However, before the deadly blade can connect, a heavy metal stake is violently driven deep into the creature's head. As the colossal beast crashes heavily to the ground, Damien calmly steps into view and asks Commander Taran if he is all right. Recognizing the young rookie standing over the fallen corpse, Taran confusedly questions how Damien managed to get there. Before the boy can fully explain, Vex quickly steps up right beside him. The seasoned scout leader urgently informs the captain that they have a critical report to make, officially declaring that the scouting party has successfully found the main abomination actively imbued with demonic energy. Following Vex's report, Damien leans in and secretly whispers something directly into Taran's ear. Hearing the rookie's hushed words, Taran's expression instantly hardens into a mask of deep seriousness. Understanding the gravity of the situation, the veteran commander immediately declares that he is requesting an emergency tactical meeting right now. The scene then shifts to the dimly lit central command tent. Commander Taran stands before Baron Diello and the other commanding officers, urgently relaying that their scouting party has located the demonic abomination. When a commander asks if the incredible intelligence is true, Taran confirms it, but grimly adds that there is a significant problem. As the officers nervously ask what the issue could be, Taran brings Damien forward. The captain introduces the boy as Damien of the Neo-Khalitz unit, explaining to the high command that this specific rookie is the soldier who actually found the abomination during the mission. Stepping forward under the intense scrutiny of the senior officers, Damien firmly speaks up, stating that he will deliver the detailed report on his superior's behalf. Taking charge of the briefing, the young spearman explains that the main abomination actively generating the demonic energy is currently located near the center of the forest. He describes the dark source as a massive, pulsing crystal, roughly the size of a grown person. However, Damien warns that the truly horrifying part of the discovery is its defensive line. He grimly reveals to the shocked high command that there are easily over 100 monsters waiting directly in front of the massive crystal. Damien clarifies the terrifying nature of the threat, stating that the beasts guarding the crystal are far more dangerous than the ones they are currently facing. specifically identifying them as high-tier monsters like massive trolls and corrupted black bears. Hearing this grim intelligence, two of the senior officers nearby immediately begin to sweat, nervously repeating the impossible numbers and questioning how they could possibly deal with over 100 high-tier beasts waiting in ambush. Captain Basel urgently advises Baron Diello that they must retreat immediately, warning that their forces will be completely wiped out in their current condition. Offended by the suggestion, the arrogant Baron questions if their elite soldiers should really fall back because of mere monsters. Losing his composure, Basil yells back that these are not mere monsters, emphasizing that a single normal black bear would already require 10 soldiers to handle. Furious at the insubordination, Diello violently screams at the captain for daring to raise his voice. The officers attempt to impress the severity of the situation upon the stubborn commander, pointing out that creatures poisoned by demonic energy are vastly stronger than normal. They note that their troops are already struggling to take down even a single corrupted goblin. Refusing to listen to reason, Diello violently draws his sword and tells them to shut up, cruelly blaming their struggles on the soldiers themselves being weak. Pressing his gleaming blade directly against Captain Basil's throat, the enraged Baron threatens to sever the veteran's head from his body if he speaks another word. Basil grits his teeth in silent, helpless frustration. The tense standoff is briefly interrupted when Temple Commander Hemmerin turns his attention back to Damien, asking the young recruit if his terrifying report is truly accurate. Damien firmly confirms his intelligence, swearing on his life that he hasn't spoken a single lie. Hemmerin strokes his chin, humming thoughtfully at the grim confirmation. Damien continues his tactical assessment, warning the High Command that even if they somehow manage to kill the initial waves of beasts, the sheer number of high-tier monsters will eventually wipe the army out. The young spearman tries to suggest the best tactical method going forward, but Baron Diello instantly cuts him off with a dark, terrifying glare. His face shadowed with madness, the nobleman coldly declares that there will be absolutely no retreat and insists that the subjugation mission must succeed at all costs. As Commander Taran and Captain Basil watch in grim, defeated silence, Damien steps forward with a calm demeanor. He smoothly interjects into the heavy silence, assuring the tense officers that there is still a way for the subjugation force to succeed. As the senior officers stare at Damien in disbelief, he notes internally that they are looking at him as if questioning what a mere soldier could possibly know. Unfazed by their judgment, he silently acknowledges that he is already entirely used to being looked at like this. Taking a steadying breath, Damien objectively states to the High Command that with their current combat power, there is simply no way they can handle a monster wave of this magnitude. However, he quickly adds a glimmer of hope, stating that it is still possible for them to take the initiative and make the first move before the monsters arrive. Baron Diello scoffs at the suggestion, asking what kind of first move the rookie could possibly have in mind. Unwavering, Damien firmly proposes that they immediately form a small elite assault squad and infiltrate the center of the forest to completely destroy the massive crystal before the terrifying monster wave reaches the main camp. Staring at the boy, Commander Taran asks Damien if he genuinely thinks such a desperate plan is actually possible. Damien nods confidently, stating his firm belief that it is an option well worth trying. Temple Commander Hemmerin steps forward, asking Damien a critical question regarding the defense of the crystal. He asks the boy if there were any other monsters actively guarding the area around the crystal when he found it. Damien confirms that of course there were other monsters. As Hemmerin processes this, Damien explains the terrifying sight of the massive beasts lurking near the crystal, particularly a giant, stone-like monster that he estimates likely possesses physical strength far surpassing even that of an ogre. He silently acknowledges that a small assault squad wouldn't have the raw combat power necessary to kill them all. Returning his focus to Hemmerin, Damien quickly explains the second phase of his strategy. He proposes that instead of trying to kill the powerful guards, they simply need to draw their attention away. He argues that if they can successfully lure the defending monsters away from the center, the rest of the assault squad can safely attack the crystal in the meantime. The Baron stares at Damien, repeating the boy's strategy aloud, summarizing that they will lure the monsters away and destroy the crystal while it's undefended. Damien firmly confirms this is his judgment. Hearing the ambitious, highly dangerous plan, Terran turns to Vex, asking the seasoned scout leader for his professional opinion. Vex remains silent for a tense moment before finally speaking up. He frankly admits that he believes the entire plan is a completely reckless operation. However, Vex quickly adds that despite the extreme danger, if there is any way to actually lead this doomed subjugation to victory, he firmly believes this specific operation, conceived by Damien, is the only one that can succeed. Taking in Vex's serious endorsement, Terran solemnly nods his head in agreement. Taking charge of the desperate situation, Commander Taran firmly declares that the Neocalit's unit officially agrees to form the proposed assault squad. Captain Basil quickly stands by his side, confirming that the Urkel garrison also fully supports the dangerous mission. Temple Commander Hemmerin then addresses the group, explaining that while the Temple cannot spare many forces, since the main army will desperately need their holy power to survive the incoming wave, he and Priestess Claire will personally join the strike team. He emphasizes that the young priestess possesses immense divine power that will prove to be a crucial asset for the mission's success. Faced with the unified resolve of his officers, Baron Dielo finally yields to the risky plan. Sweating and visibly stressed, the commander officially authorizes the formation of the assault squad. He urgently barks out orders to immediately select the 10 most outstanding personnel from each unit to comprise the elite team, furiously screaming at his men to hurry up and execute the mobilization right now. Amidst the frantic rush to assemble the strike force, Commander Taran runs alongside Damien through the dark woods. Calling out to the young rookie, Taran locks eyes with him and seriously informs the boy that he is coming with them on the highly dangerous assault mission. Gripping his weapon tightly, Damien flashes a determined, confident smile and readily accepts the captain's order without hesitation.
Hello everyone. Have you enjoyed the story? If you enjoyed, please like, share and subscribe the channel.